Let's give up a little bit of vPub time to some transatlantic YouTube whiskey hangouts. See you in a minute. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to another Thursday. Welcome to another vPub. I hope you're all doing very well. I want to just quickly welcome everyone that's going to inevitably be picking this up on the replay too. I don't do that enough, and I am very, very grateful when you do pick it up on the replay. I understand that time zones in our life doesn't always work around a live stream. I understand that. Whiskey has to fit around our lives, not the other way. If you are picking this up on the replay, I promise you, I'll make a promise to you now, and I need to do this more often. If you leave comments in the comment section underneath the video, I will respond to every one of you. I'm very grateful for you for picking it up on the replay. If you're tuning in live, if you're sitting here in the lounge with all your other barflies, welcome, pull up a stool, and I hope you're ready to relax and have a nice, relaxed stream tonight. I've been a wee bit lazy today. I didn't really need to do a lot of preparation for tonight's vPub because it's just a relaxed hangout and a relaxed kind of meander through whiskey and whiskytube and all that kind of thing with a friend of mine from across the Atlantic, Jason Callori from the Mash and Drum channel. I remember discovering Jason's channel a couple of years back, just as he was starting out, and I had a feeling inside me that he was going to do very, very well, and he has done very, very well. The passion comes across. His commitment to the platform, to whiskey and to sharing whiskey is obvious, and he's doing great things. Mostly bourbon, but he focuses also a wee bit on Scotch and world whiskies as well. So it's going to be nice to chat to Jason tonight and have a bit of a hangout with him. I hope you're looking forward to that. I hope you had a chance to pick up his blind challenge. He completed the Aqvavitae Blind Challenge, and that video was released today. I hope it's not spoiling it to say that he did really impressively well. Not just in terms of score. I'm talking about as he interrogates and assesses each of the whiskies. Quite amazing to watch. Anyway, I'll jump into the lounge and I'll welcome all you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. Remember, if you're trying to get my attention, I know it's tricky for you guys watching on Facebook. It's very difficult for me to interact with you on Facebook as well. I don't always catch the Facebook comments. I'll maybe pull that chat up and see if I catch any Facebook comments tonight. But most of the comments I'm interacting with tonight are directly within the YouTube chat, the lounge as I call it. If you're trying to get my attention, if you type Aqvavitae, it highlights orange on my side, and I should be able to you should be able to catch my attention. Michael, Sunday Evening Scotch is in. So good to see you, my friend. Just a turn round, and Lee Hosey from Haddington Whiskey has bought me a wee virtual dram. Lee, thank you so much. I'll raise a glass and say sláinte to you, buddy. It's nice to welcome you into another vPub. Cheers, Lee. No comment from Lee, just buying me a wee virtual dram. Nice to see you in, Michael, Sunday Evening Scotch. Nice to see Frank, Falsgraf, Ebhead Rolf over in Norway, Carol Van Wallingham as well. Good evening, y'all. Good evening, Carol. Always great to see you in. Whiskey 101, that's Shyla. Is it Shyla? Shyla, I always forget your name. I think I've remembered it this time. I used to know someone with a very similar name to that, so that's what I kind of trip up a wee bit. I have to think twice, but it's nice to welcome you. Good to see you in. Aye, Laddie is here. Rombout, so good to see you as well. Good to welcome you into the vPub again, my friend. Bill Monteith is here saying, Aqvavitae, you've earned it as a Yank. I am torn on this one. Oh, wow. I wonder what I've earned. What have I earned, Bill? Greg's Whiskey Guide is here. Good to see you, Greg. He's saying one of the greatest channels around indeed, the Mash and Drum. I'm so glad that you're excited to see Jason in tonight. I agree with you, Greg. Fantastic stuff. Lindsay Holman is here saying good evening, Aqvavitae. Thomas Elmer is here, relaxing with lunch. Thomas, thanks so much for joining at a lunchtime on a Thursday, my friend. I've actually got your bottle on hand, the bottle of Elmer T. Lee that you gifted me when I was in the States last year, and I was discussing it with Jason earlier in the week. David Anderson is saying, evening, Aqvavitae. David, good to welcome you in here, my friend. Good to see you. So many more of you. The chat is going very, very quickly already. Drew from Arizona is in. Wonderful, Drew. Nice to welcome you, my friend. Simon Ray, love this is a pub that doesn't have to close at 10. Yes. This is the wonderful thing about this. It doesn't matter what's happening with lockdown restrictions wherever you are globally. This pub stays open. And as long as the internet's running, as long as the electricity is there, this pub stays open. Whiskey Central is here saying, yes, my name is Shyla. Whiskey 101, Whiskey Central. That's the mistake I'm making. And the icon looks very similar too. Okay, I'm going to try to lock that in now. Whiskey Central is Shyla. Really, really nice to welcome you. So I'm looking for Whiskey 101 now, because that means I think Whiskey 101, is that Alan? Nick. Of course it is Nick Stilton Massey. Nick. This is, I turned 50 in May this year, as you know, and I think it's becoming more and more tricky to remember all of these names. I do okay, but I apologise to Nick, Whiskey 101, and Shyla, Whiskey Central. Cool Running is here saying, hi, Roy, Slancha to you as well, my friend. Nice to welcome you in. Bill Monteith is saying that he's, I'm giving myself a break for not having to prep so much for tonight's vPub. I mean, I don't do a hell of a lot of prep anyway, Bill. I'm probably, you can probably tell. There is a quiz. There's a quiz at the end. We'll finish on a quiz like we always do. That's prepped and ready to go. We're going to have a wee game of, is it Speyside, just Jason and I tonight. But other than that, it's just Jason and I having a bit of a relaxed hangout. Chris KY is in saying Thursday night is the new Saturday night for me. Good. That sounds good to me as well. Thursday night being a Saturday night. Unfortunately, I have put out 5 glasses tonight, and I'm going to restrict myself to 5 drams because about 10 a.m. tomorrow, I'm driving with the family. They've got a holiday weekend. We've got a Friday off tomorrow, and we're going away for an overnight. So I'm going to restrict, especially the chances, because I'm drinking with Jason tonight, there's a chance it's going to be cask strength, or should I say higher proof whiskies that we're enjoying tonight. So that's what I'm going to do, just restrict the empty, clean Glencairns that I have in front of me tonight. Arnie Tiger is here. So good to see you, Arnie, my friend. Hellswood is here. Helen, wonderful to see you, Helen. You'll be sitting next to Andy, no doubt. Loving the Glencadam 10-year-old. So glad that you're enjoying that. I'm going to tease a new video series at some point tonight, probably towards the end. But I can mention that over the course of the weekend, probably tomorrow, there's going to be a kind of introductory video is going to come out for a new kind of pre-recorded series on the channel. And the first episode of that's going to celebrate whiskies that exceed expectation, hero whiskies, if you like. That'll drop tomorrow. Patrons have already been involved in it. They got to see it this week. I used them as a bit of a sounding board on it. And they got the first video dropped. So that will go public at some point tomorrow. I hope you catch that and give me some feedback on it. Canor Connoisseur is in saying, ahoy, Roy, good to see you, my friend. Danny McKinley, don't look a day over 49, sir. Danny, you can come back again. Thank you so much. It's not so much how you look, I think it's how you feel. Most days, I really don't feel anything like my age, but occasionally it creeps up and you remind yourself that you are knocking on a wee bit. Craig Dollier is here. Craig, also good to see you in the vPub. Locally here, so Friday nights would normally be Craig. His missus is my cousin, and my wife would be getting together occasional Friday nights and having a bit of a curry, but we're missing that right now because the lockdown in our region means that we're not able to go into each other's homes right now. It's pretty frustrating, but things are getting a bit scary again, so we've all got to get back to that position where we're making cannier decisions with each other, right? Elsewhere is saying, only having one tonight too, as a way to the lakes tomorrow. Have packed the Glencadam, lol. No doubt, Helen, you'll be making a wee visit to the Lakes Distillery as well. Graham Fraser is here. Graham, always great to see you. Just on my 5th dram, SMWS Clynelish, nice choice. But now on the train home from Glasgow later. Now, okay, but on the train home from Glasgow later. So, Graham, you're maybe sitting in Bath Street, SMWS right now. Would that be right? Jimmy Legg is saying it's all about how you look. Feelings are for wine drinkers. Nice to have you, Jimmy. Always nice to have you and your humour, and my friend Doc McAllen Fine and Rare is here, and from an admin perspective, looking after us tonight, as well as, did I see Alistair a wee bit earlier? So nice to welcome you all in. Listen, I'm really excited to have my friend Jason in with us tonight. I'm just going to get him on in. I've known Jason for a while, kind of distantly. I had the pleasure of hanging out with him for a wee bit and meeting him in Texas last year. And that's really kind of cool when you get to meet people in real life and realize that they're actually exactly the same as you enjoy them on video. And back then I remember saying to him, it'd be good if we could get together and have a bit of a collaboration, come up with a wee theme and do something on the channel. He was like, yeah, we're up for that. That was a year ago and nothing's been done. And I came to realize that actually we don't need a solid rock theme. We just need something to talk about. And that is obvious. Whiskey community, whiskytube. We can talk about whiskey roots, how it started for Jason, what made him take that step then from loving whiskey into sharing it over YouTube. Talk about our opinions of Scotch and our opinions of bourbon and how they can coexist and things. And maybe spend a bit of time talking about just how amazing he did on the blind challenge. You would hopefully have seen that video. If you haven't seen it, it's available on his channel, The Mash and Drum. Right now you can pick it up and watch it at your leisure. I started to watch Jason. The first few videos were kind of bourbon themed. Then very early in the kind of YouTube journey, he switched to sharing and exploring Scotch whiskies, and I found that quite interesting. And then I caught a video one day where he was sipping an Islay Scotch whiskey for the first time, in awareness of it being an Islay Scotch whiskey. And he did that live on video and he put it out on YouTube. And it's one of those events that made me realize that the advantage that video has as a sharing medium for somebody to be able to witness that experience and make it a shared experience, because you see every grimace, every reaction. You can see him in his silence thinking and trying to process this event that's just happened as he sipped a Lagavulin for his first time ever. Let me reach out to my friend Jason and welcome him in to the vPub. Hey!
Oh, I'm sorry.
Perfect timing. How are you, buddy? You doing well?
I'm doing very well. How you doing, Roy?
I'm doing excellent. All the better for seeing you. It's really nice to welcome you behind the bar in a vPub, my friend. I hope you're sitting comfortably, because I think you're planning to stay with us for the duration, which is wonderful.
Absolutely. I'm in for the long haul tonight. Thank you so much for having me on. I've been looking forward to collaborating with you, and I think the combination of the blind tasting today and the live at the vPub tonight is a great combination.
Well, it just meant it forced the timing for us, right? Because it's all very well saying, yeah, we'll get together, we'll do a collaboration, and then just nothing happens. We just kind of let it drift. And it's not because we don't want to, it's just that we haven't been inspired into doing something. So actually managing to get the blind challenge shipped out to you, you giving me the footage back for edit overlays done, send it back to you, release it on your channel. It's a great collaboration because it shows just how humble we are in the whiskey kind of world. We know that we can trust each other to do that kind of thing. So that's to me, it's it is quite a deep level of trust and collaboration that's needed for that thing. But you gave me a very easy video to edit, my friend. You really did. You really did. You've got to be pleased with how you did.
I gotta say, I was extremely pleased how I did going into it. I got to thank actually Mike, Sunday Evening Scotch is in the chat. I actually tasked him with sending me a blind Scotch challenge in the same kind of way that you would do it. And I was testing myself, knowing, I was leading up to finally getting your blind challenge in the mail. So when I finally got it and I was able to sit down and do it, I did find some similarities in some of the stuff I was tasting. But once you open that second envelope and you see those challenges and you kind of break them down, stuff started to become a little bit clearer for me. But I think the selection you chose was absolutely brilliant. I think I got something, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, it's been out. So I think we're past the statute of limitations at this point, but
yes,
the vintage.
We'll try not to spoil it for those who haven't seen it. We'll try not to.
Yeah, but it was great. It was a great selection. A couple banana peels there. It was great.
And I think I have to kind of mention there, because anybody that has done it, like Michael from Sunday Evening Scotch or whatever, when he's kind of putting together, curating these little sets to have a blind challenge, especially if you're going to put a layer in there that is genuine challenges, you do have to put a lot of thought in, because it's not just about testing the person to pick out the thing. You're actually trying to test things like world whiskey versus Scotch, a premium expenses versus a budget, a contemporary whiskey versus an antique whiskey, all of those dynamics. So you're trying to curate a set that will test those things, and also that will contrast against each other, but not be so contrast that it's really easy to pick out. Like if you only put one heavily peated Scotch in a lineup, you would know that that's going to be the Islay or the Ardmore or whatever it may be. So it's trying to pick a set that could pose a bit of a puzzle for the person who's sipping it. But I think the most interesting takeaway for me every time is always that ranking, how they rank it.
Yes, and you were a bit surprised at my rankings for one.
Well, I'm not, like I say, I'm not going to spoil it.
I know.
But I am a wee bit surprised. But that's exactly what it's about, Jason, because you had no preconceptions. You're picking that purely on the experience you're having.
Yep.
And I witnessed you going through those when you didn't know what they were, and you expressed exactly what you were feeling about each one before you chose your 1 to 5. So it's justified. There's nothing to worry about. The 1 to 5 is what it is. Now, I'm sure you would agree with me that often you want to change your mind as you're going through. It can happen that you want to switch it back up again, but that's fine. That's part of whiskey. Maybe if I gave you that same 5 set a year from now, you might not pick the same 1 to 5 in order. But that's the interesting thing for me, because it's rarely the expensive one that comes first.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I love about it. Again, you mentioned it. It breaks down all the preconceived notions of what you think an expensive Scotch could be based on age, ABV, whatever it may be. And the results from that particular blind tasting were, they were surprising, especially that one that was in there that was very different from the others that I picked up on. And that one stood out to me as something very unique. And that's why I really liked it.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'm sipping a dram as a nod to you and a nod to the blind tasting. I can tell you what's in this glass now. I won't tell anyone where you placed this, but you very much enjoyed this. And as I'm sipping it and smelling it tonight, I get exactly what you're talking about. I know exactly what you mean when you talk about it being very bourbon-esque in its behavior and its presentation.
Mm-hmm.
So you know which one I'm sipping, don't you?
Absolutely.
This was one of the whiskies in the lineup. This doesn't spoil anything because I reveal very early on in the video with the overlays what Jason is sipping. This is actually a Taiwanese whiskey from Nantao Distillery. This is their Omar single malt, 46% ABV, and this is their bourbon cask edition. Jason picked out that bourbon cask from the get-go, and he started to talk about it behaving a bit like a light, fruity, tropical bourbon style with the honey and things. And I'm getting all of that tonight. It was
very citrusy to me on the palate. It came off very bourbon-esque on the nose. I was getting a lot of vanilla, heavy butterscotch, some citrus, but then on the palate, it had a very herbal and floral and citrusy quality to it and not to mention, for something that was so herbal and floral, has a really nice bite on the finish, and that's what grabbed me.
It's a good dram. It's a good whiskey. It's an interesting thing. And that citrus you're talking about is coming off tonight like a very nice sweet orange, a mandarin orange. But there's a dryness, and it goes a bit, that's kind of the herbal thing that you're talking about maybe, and it goes to that nice spite, so it leaves a nice grip on the palate, leaves a nice texture.
Absolutely.
This was a gift to me. I would never normally have reached for this whiskey, but one of my work colleagues was in Taiwan, and he brought this back thinking that it might be something I hadn't come across before, and he was absolutely spot on. I'm glad to have this, and I'm glad that I was able to include it in the lineup. Let's not talk about what it beat in that lineup.
Again,
listen, if anybody is interested in posing a question to Jason at any point throughout tonight, just try and grab my attention. If I don't get you first time, just kind of copy and paste and put it in, and I'll try and pick it up. But Donner Pass Whiskey Tim is saying that Kilkerran 8 instantly turned into a unicorn. So to actually buy it now would be close to the price of the Clynelish. Yes, I don't doubt that Kilkerran 8 has... I've got a bottle on hand, I think, right here, actually. You can see the colour of this.
Oh, my God.
So this is from Richard Oloroso sherry casks. And this is the 57.1% bottling. You can see the colour of it. It's really... And we know, because it's Kilkerran, because we know that distillery, we can trust that this is fully natural, this colour. It's... I mean, honestly, I don't think it's the best example if you were going to give somebody a good example of Kilkerran. But despite that super, super active and bold, vibrant cask, there is enough spirit of Kilkerran still there that you were able to pick out. You even said it when you didn't know what it was. You said, this is either old or this is Campbelltown.
Yeah.
Didn't you?
Yeah, and that's what tripped me up during the first... Well, I mean, if you guys haven't seen it yet, there was a part there where the two selections I had to pick out were either an expensive, very lauded whiskey, award-winning whiskey, and the other was a Campbelltown. And when I was trying to go back and forth between those two, I think that was kind of the thing that slipped me up, because when I smelled that Kilkerran, that funk that came through was obviously a Campbelltown. But then you start playing in your head that this was so damn good and it's so rich in color, you're thinking it could be a ultra aged, sherry cask type of profile to it. So that's where I got tripped up. But once I saw the reveal, I kind of figured it out.
You worked it out. Absolutely, you did. And anybody that's watching how you appraise that, they would understand. Jimmy Legg's asking a good question about Clynelish, but I want to mention, looks like Bill from Whiskey Dictionary has dropped by to leave a wee virtual dram. Let's raise a wee glass to our friend Bill. Bill, my friend, thank you so much for the virtual dram. He's saying love the collab. Cheers, buddy. Thanks for stopping by. Bill is on that nomination list. You dodged a bullet this time, Bill. Somebody else was nominated, but I've got a feeling that it's going to come your way before too long. Jimmy Legg is saying, it's quite an interesting one he's asked. He said, I didn't hear him mention waxiness at all on the independent bottle of Clynelish. Is it not that waxy? I have to say, Jimmy, that Clynelish is renowned for its waxiness, but that displays best for me in a ex-bourbon cask. The Signature Vintage Clynelish that I sent to Jason, and those cask strength releases are more often than not from a refill sherry butt. A lot of people prefer their Clynelish ex-bourbon. I think the reason that those Signature Vintages work so well is that they are refill sherry, so it's not super active sherry. It's quite light. But it does mean that the profile isn't what you're expecting from a typically clean, sweet, barley sugar, waxy Clynelish. So I wouldn't always imagine that Jason would pick that. I have to say that this Omar itself is quite nice and textured. And the Kilkerran also has a lovely mouthfeel as well. I think it's overtaken by the jagginess, the vibrance, the volume that it's speaking to you. But all of them have a nice mouthfeel. So once he's in that end of the lineup, I don't think that Clynelish, in fact, I know I've still got a wee bit of that. It's not very waxy.
Yeah, the Omar actually stood out, and I even said it too, had a very viscous and silky mouthfeel to it. I think for you say, you guys say waxy. For me, I describe it as viscous and oily almost, where it was just really sticking to the palate, and that's what kind of drove my decision for that particular whiskey.
It's very interesting because when you picked up the Clynelish, immediately you saw your face light up and say, okay, this is delicious.
Yeah.
You knew that you'd kind of meandered through the lower end. You knew you had started to get into the good stuff. And I could see you enjoying it. I actually thought that you would place it higher than you did from your reaction. But, not going to hold grudges. It's not a problem.
I'm sorry, man. It was just, I don't know. I did say
No,
it was one of the best, it was one of the best balanced scotches in the entire lineup. It had everything. It had a hint of cocoa. It had a hint of vanilla. All your barrel influence, some oak, some spice. I mean, it was extremely well balanced. You could definitely tell there was some age to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't. I judge a lot, and a lot of people ask me, "Hey, when you're tasting a whiskey, what do you judge the most on?" And for those of you that want to know, for me, it's always the finish. So the finish for me is what it's kind of a combination between finish and mouthfeel. If something's oily and sticks to the palate and also leaves a really nice lingering finish that makes me want to go back to that whiskey, that's what I judge on it most. Because you could have a great front of the palate, you could have some great flavor, but if you take that sip and it just goes away like this, that doesn't really excite me. And unfortunately for the Clynelish, I think that's what the downfall was. As great and as delicious it wasn't hanging on as much as the Kakarin and the Omar.
Yeah, yeah. And I think so much of this is not just about how that whiskey performs in terms of favorite to least. You're also placing a whiskey in company that it could detract from it. You're maybe putting something that's quite subtle and well crafted, and one of these drams that you'd maybe want to have one or two drams in order to get the most out of it. One of these quieter kind of slow burner type drams. But if you put that in a lineup with something really bold, like the Kilkerran 8, if you put it in a lineup alongside the Omar, which is super sweet, all that kind of rich vanilla and citrus that you're talking about there, then the more subtle dram that's loved, that's generally loved, can also seem a bit quiet.
Oh, I agree. There's plenty of bourbons that I've had when you have different things next to each other, and then you go back and you drink them in reverse and realize the effect that can have on what you just tasted. I think that blows me away more than anything.
Yep. I think a huge tip to give anyone, if they were going along to a tasting, especially if it's a vertical tasting, this is key. If you're going to a vertical tasting, you need to remember this. Don't finish all your drams one at a time. Leave a little bit in each dram so that you can do exactly as Jason just said, and you can go back again and reassess them once you've been through the lineup. Not only because they change and switch up, and by contrast, but also because you can, let's imagine any lineup you want to pick, Glendronach, Glengoyne, Glencadam, anyone. You're always going to start off at the lighter end of the scale. You're going to start off at the entry-level things, 46% ABV or less, and you're going to build up through all these bolder flavors, wine cask finishes, perhaps peated additions, more mature drams. So you come away from that tasting raving about the expensive one or the boldest flavor or whatever it was. If you've left a little bit in your glass, you can go back and sip, and maybe that entry-level one, you'll be struck by just how good it is for an entry-level whiskey. And you're not suddenly seduced by the expensive, the bold, or the more communicative whiskies.
Yeah, so that's actually what I did off camera. So when I shut the camera off, when I was trying to rank them, I actually went in reverse order, because that's for me is the ultimate test. If I can go in reverse order and those certain whiskeys still stand out, then that's how I nail my lineup, and that's how I gauge it. Because if you go in reverse order and something changes and something you pick up on that you didn't before, that could either better a whiskey or it could worsen a whiskey for me, especially when you compare it to the other ones you have. But I think that particular lineup actually hurt the Clynelish a bit for me. But if I had that whiskey, I had a little bit left in the sample bottle you sent, and I had it on its own. And on its own, I was actually surprised myself. I'm like, wow, this is actually a really phenomenal Scotch. I think it was the lineup it was in that kind of held it down a bit.
And I think it's worthwhile pointing out another downside of blind tasting. Mm-hmm. When you do have something in the lineup, or you are getting to taste something blind that is phenomenal, perhaps because it is hard to come by, it's rare, it's a sip of history, or it's something that so many of your friends or whatever really, really love, then there's more to the whiskey then sipping it blind is probably going to give it. There's sometimes a bit of ceremony. You need to, as you tear the foil off that special bottle, it doesn't need to live up to being your best whiskey of the year or whatever, because it's amped by the environment, by the whiskey that it is, the expression that it is, where it's from, what it means to you on so many environmental and emotional levels. The blind tasting also does strip that away as well. It's quite brutal. So there's a lot of ceremony that blind tasting can take away. And then you, like you say, you go back off camera and you sip it knowing that you're sipping a 1990s Clynelish and everybody loves that stuff. And you sip it in a quiet moment and you think, okay. And you know, you realize that probably in the lineup that it was in, it did harm it a little bit. Listen, Jason, I think just before we finish up talking about the blind tasting, hats off to you. Easy to edit, a pleasure to edit. Wonderful collaboration, and I think anybody that's going to be doing that blind challenge in the future need to go back and maybe listen to Jason's tips that he's given tonight, but watch his approach and how he's doing that, because I was impressed watching it. The other thing I loved about it as well, and I'm sure other people have picked up on it, was that palpable tension that came across. You were taking it very, very seriously. You were going through this. You knew that there was going to be certain challenges ahead and things, and you wanted to do the whiskies justice. And you wanted to do yourself justice. You weren't nervous at all. I didn't see any nerves. No, the tension was there.
Yeah, I was excited. I was excited to do it, but at the same time, I did want to take it very seriously. I felt like when you get something that says Aqvavitae Challenge, you take that seriously.
Yeah, maybe it should have been named something different. Aqvavitae Blind collaboration.
No, you got to keep it. You got to scare the pants off some people.
Yeah, it's funny because one of my own community, Aaron McFault, sent me one. And if you're going to dish the medicine, you have to take the medicine, right? And so I had to take one myself and do it myself. That video is up in my channel. But listen, anybody that hasn't seen that video from Jason, just go over to Jason Mash and Drum on YouTube, and it's his most recent video, Aqvavitae Blind Challenge. Don't look at how many minutes it is, watch it, and then think about how many minutes, because it goes by very, very quickly. It's really enjoyable to watch. Whiskey Mystery Phil is saying, ask Jason how he trained.
So I mentioned a little bit earlier, I did Sunday evening Scotch. Mike, who's in the chat, he sent me a blind tasting to do it. I also, the only thing I couldn't train for was the vintage selection you had in there, because I just have not had any, and I said this in the video too, when it comes to older bourbons, older American whiskeys, there's a certain flavor profile that I distinguish older bourbons with. I haven't had that type of experience with vintage scotches, unfortunately. So that I think was going to be my biggest challenge to figure out. And luckily I was able to kind of pick that one out just by process of elimination.
I'm going to try and get the camera to focus on this. Do you see just how vintage we're talking about here?
Oh, there it is.
Yeah. It's tough to even pick up on.
Yeah.
Johnny Walker Red Label. So this is really bashed and worn here. This is from the 60s, maybe early 70s is the most recent it is. So we're speaking about distillate from the 50s and 60s in here. So this is a real antique thing. And putting it in a lineup like I did is not always fair to this, because like I say, the ceremony of this is bigger than the whiskey, the fact that you're able to sip whiskey from that era. But we're speaking about budget whiskey from that era. Even though Johnny Walker is a premium blend brand, this is their entry-level product.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't expect it to do great, but some people love this stuff. And I've got some very old Black Label as well, and I love the old Black Label. It's just a pleasure to go in and sip. This comes across a little bit flat. It's a wee bit like a flat Coke or a flat root beer sometimes. It's kind of, it doesn't really, doesn't help that it's at 40% ABV as well. But sometimes it's just a nice little sip of history, and that's why I like to have it there.
I was actually really surprised by the grouse that you had in there.
£20 for a bottle of Naked Grouse.
That's a great bottle. I would sip on that. I mean, not much of a finish on it, but I think what it lacked in finish, it made up for in flavor on the front of the palate. I enjoyed.
Well, I remember the Whiskey Rev. I'm going to see the Whiskey Rev this weekend. He came down. He was working at Macallan at the time. He came down with little samples and little miniature bottles. One of the blind samples he handed me was Naked Grouse. And all he wanted me to do was just to say, look, I don't want an appraisal. Just tell me if you like it or not. And I said, yeah, I love it. It's great. And he's like, it's Naked Grouse. And I'm like, shut up. And it's not. But that's exactly why we all need to strip away these kind of preconceptions. Yes, it's Naked Grouse, but it turns out it's a really nice sipping whiskey.
Yeah.
And we have to always kind of... If we don't remember our gateway whiskies and their original experiences, the whiskey will remind us if we sip it blind.
Exactly right.
Okay, Sunday Evening Scotch Michael is in. Michael told me about the challenges he was shipping to you as well. He's saying, I'm a big fan of Naked Grouse. It's 43% in the US. You get a few more points. Jason, you should totally grab a bottle. Hell's Wood is also saying Naked Grouse, great easy drinker and a great start to a flight. And Akshay Jaitley is saying, do tell Jason that I always smile when he says, let's go in for another sip. That is one of your things. And in fact, it's what you do in the Lagavulin video as well. You kind of give your initial impression, but already you're saying, okay, we need to go in again for a second.
I always like to do multiple sips because the whiskey changes as your palate adjusts to it. It's just the way I like to taste. I always look for consistency as well, making sure that, you know, the second or third sip is at least close to what you got in that first sip. Because a lot of bourbons and whiskeys that I've tried, some can be great on that first sip, but then the more you sip it, it'll just kind of flatten out. Different flavors will come about, but what you really want is that full blast of flavors with each and every sip. And you know, a lot of whiskeys don't do that, so that's why I take all those multiple sips, and that's why I pour such a big glass.
Well, but I think you're right, and I think also what can happen, especially if you take if it's high proof bourbons or if it's Isla peated whiskies or something, the first couple of sips are going to help you get over the immediate, most overpowering heavy flavors or traits like the peat and smoke on an Isla. The first couple of sips is going to help you start to dial that out and taste beyond the peat and smoke. Probably the same for the oak. That's going to happen when you first go into a bourbon, especially if it's well-aged bourbon, right? You're going to get that wood and oak hit first. So you're trying to dial past that and see what the more subtle things are. I get completely what you're talking about. Everwind is here. Good to see Everwind. He's saying, unlike most challenges, Jason did not second guess himself like many others do. That made a difference. I have to say, first instinct has a lot of weight in these things. Absolutely agree with you, Everwind. Absolutely. Carlos Sanchez, my friend Carlos Sanchez has bought me a wee dram to say, great collab, gents. Enjoy your holiday with the family, Roy. Hey, Carlos, thank you so much, my friend. Slancheva to you.
Salanch. That's one thing I did learn from watching other challenges. Is guys would overthink, they would second guess. I've kind of incorporated that into my own blind tastings. Always go with your gut instinct, even though it could be wrong. Most of the time, it's actually you're either close or you're right. So I knew whatever I tasted, whatever I was going to call out is what I thought was what. I had a couple trip ups in there, but for the most part, yeah, everyone called it. I called it out on my first, what I thought in my gut. That's what it was. And I didn't look back.
So would you recommend to people that are taking this blind challenge in the future that perhaps what they should do is watch some of the previous blind challenges?
Yeah, I mean, it helped me out a lot too. I thought Scott from Scotch Test Dummies, I really enjoyed his. I thought he had a really interesting way of breaking down his drams and how he went back through it. He did really well. You know, his was kind of the one I focused on the most. I thought Keith from Malta Man Cave did a cool job doing it too. But yeah, you kind of learn some tips and tricks. And like I said, I had my own tips and tricks that I do for my own blind tastings. But as everyone mentioned, second guessing, I think, is probably to the detriment of most blind tastings. You want to just go with your gut, what you think it is, and stick with it. Because once your mind starts going and you switch back and forth, then then you're down 5 points before you know it.
Yeah. When you say stick with what it is, we're not talking about pick the distillery, pick the expression. We're talking about the profile, the genre, the ABV, the style,
Correct.
and the age. You know, the big buckets that you start with before you start narrowing it down with the challenges and things.
Exactly.
Just try and pinpoint the strength, the age, the region, the profile. That's exactly what I think you were doing. Jason Bussey has just bought me a dram as well. What a team. Love seeing you all collaborate together. BDC 10-year. What is the hashtags that Jason's using there? BDC?
So BDC comes from the Whiskey Dick in his channel. It stands for Big Dick Club.
All right. Okay. Okay. Big Dictionary Club, of course, right?
Big Dictionary Club. There you go.
Excellent. This is not the week to start talking about anything to do with controversial gender issues, I think. Jimmy Legacy, the Mash and Drum, are you a fan of Kavalan expressions since you enjoyed the Taiwan whiskey?
Oh, absolutely. I actually just got a Kavalan sherried single cask strength.
A soloist?
I was no, actually, I'll show it to you. I just got it. Let me grab it real quick. And you can.
Okay. McAllen Fine Rare saying, I once had a 1970s JW Black in a blind tasting with a bunch of people in a whiskey fair. People loved it, but thought I was a retard when I guessed Johnny Walker. So funny to see their faces when revealed. Doc, that's the kind of thing that you do. See all the mistakes that you make in blind challenges over the years, you just forget them. But when you get something right, when you nail it, you're never going to let that nugget leave you again. You're going to keep it forever. Whiskey Weekend Drama is saying, yeah, go with your guts. Aqvavitae had the same with the blind tasting competition. I tried too hard. Don't do that.
Yeah.
I at least make notes of your instinct. Go ahead, Jason.
I said I also watched Drew from Scotch 4 Dummies. I watched his. I thought he actually did a really great analytical way, the way he broke down the flavor profiles and the whiskeys. So just kind of going back and watching that stuff, it does help.
I'll just give a shout out to Drew and his buddies Mark, Andrew, and Sean over at Scotch 4 Dummies. Later tonight, 3 a.m. our time, 4 a.m. European time, but North American time, I think, is about 9 or 10 p.m. tonight. They are doing an Aqvavitae style live stream. They're doing a blind challenge shootout. So they've got some kind of gamified version where they're going to get together and do it together on their live stream tonight. Guys, I wish you the best of luck with it. And if anybody's still around at that time of the evening, drop by and say hello to Drew, Sean, Andrew, and Mark over at Scotch 4 Dummies. 3 out of the 4 of those have put their name forward for it. It's only Andrew that we're waiting on to offer his name into the nominee list. And there's a dram coming in from Scotch 4 Dummies right now. Amazing job, Jason. Always trust your gut, Drew. See, he's off higher now. He's done it. He gets to sit back and watch his buddies Mark and Sean take it in the future. Yeah, look at the colour of that Kavalan.
Yeah, so here's the color. You guys can see that. Actually, mine is on manual focus, but I mean, it is dark. Very, very dark. Absolute sherry bomb. Mike, again, Sunday Evening Scotch, he had sent me a sample of this, I believe, in the blind tasting. Absolutely fell in love with it. Dustin, D.H. Silv is usually watching as well. We got this from Whiskey World. It's a single select cask, 59.4%. Cask strength sherry, and it's like drinking candy. It's amazing. One of my favorites.
It is. And I think what's amazing about it is that when you spend enough time with it, especially when the profiles are similar, like a nice, elegant, decadent sherry mature product like that Kavalan versus an equivalent Scotch, you realize that, yeah, they're the same in spirit, but they're different. You can taste that they are different and they behave a little bit differently. It's kind of interesting because in order for Scotch to get to that colour, we're speaking about decades. In a typical sherry cask, you can get some super active sherry casks, of course, as we've just demonstrated from the Kilkerran there. But typically, it would be decades to get. And that Kavalan is probably, what, 5, 6, 7 years old, max?
About, yeah. It's, again, non-chill filtered. This is all natural color. It's a beast of a whiskey. I absolutely love the stuff. And, you know, this is from a guy that, you know, from really enjoys peated whiskeys and a mix of peat and bourbon and ex-sherry casks. I love the combination that those could bring to a whiskey. But when it comes to pure sherried scotches, something like this are the types that really, blow my mind, much like the Kilkerran 8 did.
Yes, yeah. And it's that kind of bold, rich, decadent thing. It might not be the kind of whiskey that you have dram after dram. It's not like a session whiskey. It's like a really big, heavy treat, and then it's like a special moment type thing. I'm going to pour something. Okay. I've got on hand some of your favorite bourbons. I've got another Scotch here that I'm going to have as a nod to you as well. But I have, and I've got a confession to make. I told you I had Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, and I showed you that I had them. I have this Elijah Craig Barrel Proof here. We talked about that. I know that you don't have that particular batch on hand. And this one was the 69.7, the original bottle of Wow. But I've had a dram of this.
That's the one that I have with you right here. It's the 69.7. So.
But this is not it. This is, I remember, this is my Bourbon Infinity bottle. So I poured this just after we were speaking the other night. I poured a little dram of this, and it was quiet and flat and much, much thinner than any ECBP deserves to be. And that's when it twigged. I I think this appeared in a recycled review. Because I love the bottle so much, I picked it and I decided that this would be my Bourbon Heels bottle. And that's exactly what it is. So unless I open this other one, we're not going to share an ECBP, but I do have Russell's Reserve.
One of my favorites.
Single barrel Russell's Reserve. I'll let you pick the dram for me. I have the Stag Junior, which is a gift from Gregor McQuee. And it says this is the 127.9 proof. Mm-hmm. And I also have, as another gift, by the way, the Russell's Reserve, the single barrel, was a gift from Dwayne Large, my friend Dwayne. It's actually got a label on it, and it says, I refer to him as Sir Dwayne. The Gregor McQuee gave me the Stag, and this one came from Ross and Jill Mashburn. This is a store pick Knob Creek. It says 9 years here, but up here it's actually 14-year hidden view, hand-selected by Fred No. It says 14-year hidden view. So what should I have? Should I have the Stag, the Russells, or the Knob Creek?
You know what? Let's do the Stag, because I have the same batch that you have. So let's share that dram together.
Excellent. Now, I did have this on a vPub before, actually, when Chad and Sarah came on. And I had a lot of cast strength bourbon that night. Don't usually go through. I think we had 7 or 8 drams. Normally in a vPub would be more on the order of 3 or 4. That was a good night. Gregor is saying, man up and drink the Stag. Steve Anderson is in as well. Good to see you, Steve. Batch 11 Stag Junior you've got there. See, there's just so much knowledge in the chat that even when I'm in a weak area that I don't really know well, like American and bourbon, they can always pitch in and help me out. And John Della Cuisine is in saying ECBP is out of my price range now. Last time I checked, they're asking about €130 now. So that would be dollars. That would probably be about $130, right?
Yeah, about. Stag Junior does fluctuate in price a lot here in the U.S. It has an MSRP of about $65, $70-ish, depending where you are. But anything Buffalo Trace here in the States, seems to be at a premium because it's Buffalo Trace. And so I've seen Stag Juniors in stores for well over $100 American. It's a great value when you can find it at the retail price because it's barrel strength. It's Buffalo Trace mash bill number 1, which is on the sweeter side, a lot less rye in there, a lot less spice. This is way more cherry cola, butterscotch, vanilla, rich caramels. So that's why a lot of people like the Buffalo Trace so much. It's pretty much Jack Jr. is junior to this guy, which is the George T. Stagg.
That's a BTAC, right?
This is the BTAC daddy. So this is the junior to the daddy here. One of the most, I think, out of everything that Buffalo Trace creates, the BTAC has to be. Those are the ones that I chase, even though they are marked up heavily normally. I get lucky every year. I have a connection that allows me to buy a couple of these. at, maybe a little bit more than retail, but I'm happy to do that because I think these are worth the chase.
Yeah, and I know that the difficulty that you have, I mean, we don't even talk about how hard they are to get over here. I guess it's kind of lotteries and things as well. But I was very fortunate. Scott from Scotch Testaments gave me a really sizable sample. I think he gave me the last of his George T. Stag. And I can't tell you what batch it was, but I took it home with me, and I was sitting here in a quiet moment, and I had that, and I messaged them immediately. It was lights out. It's difficult because to me as a Scotch drinker, bourbon has a much flatter, or let's say a narrower bandwidth of variation in the terms of the flavor profile. But I know that's so much to do with my lack of experience there and not walking around in the environment enough and investing enough time in it. But when you start to sip that level of bourbon, that level of quality and that high ABV, that high proof, it's just so different. It's so remarkably different. And every little sip is like an event. It's like a firework display going off inside your head. It's really, really incredible. On the nose, this is, the word you said is rich caramels. That's what I'm getting, very rich, everything but rich caramel.
Definitely.
So looking for cherry. Did you say cherry?
About cherry cola, I always usually get on Stag, kind of a cherry cola note. One thing I do want to say, and I think this comes from both the side of Scotch drinkers and bourbon drinkers, and you could definitely chime in the chat here. I said this before when we were talking before the live stream, how bourbon drinkers will try one Scotch. Hopefully it's not an Isla right off the bat. Sometimes they do like it right away, but then they will kind of pigeonhole every Scotch as tasting like that.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a huge detriment to just the world of Scotch alone. And I think you could have now Scotch drinkers that I know that say all bourbons taste the same. I think a lot of years ago that could have been more towards the truths, on the truth side of things. But today, when you look at over 1,000 craft distilleries across the country now and what they're creating in different areas of the United States, I mean, you talk about terroir in Scotch, the same thing is happening in American whiskey, in rye and bourbons. I can very much easily pick out a American whiskey or a bourbon that was crafted and made in California, Washington, on the West Coast, than, when you compare it to something created in Kentucky. I think, you've tried some of the Texas whiskeys. You're at the Bastard's Ball. Again,
absolutely.
Very distinctive flavor profile, extremely different than what Kentucky brings. So I think as we're seeing it now, not all bourbon does taste the same. Bourbon and American whiskeys do have a spectrum of flavors these days when you look across the realm of who's making it across the United States. And, the same goes for Scotch too. You just have to get out there and try them and find what you like best.
And we have to remember that with this kind of premium whiskey, bourbon and Scotch explosion, the producers are leaning more and more to being as varied and differentiated as they can possibly be. They're trying to kind of push the envelope and bring differentiation so that people can engage with it and answer to the demands that's been put on them by us, really.
Yeah.
And we'll raise this glass, Jason, and say cheers. Thanks to Gregor McQueen as well, as always.
Let's have a sip of this one. Ooh, that's a powerhouse.
Oh yeah. So the cherry thing, just by the power of your suggestion, absolutely, almost like boiled sweets, cherry flavored boiled sweets. The caramel in this that you're talking about is almost like a slightly burned caramel, like literally burned sugar caramel. The spice is good for days.
I always equate it to the top of a creme brulee when they toast it torch.
Right. Yep.
It's almost burnt.
Yep. But that's not a negative tasting note. That's not an off note. That's just it's very nice and rich. Again, I mean, you can see that I've really not hit this hard. But again, it's one of these drams that you pour one, and you can sit with it for a long time.
Oh, yes, you can. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not waiting too much on that one.
This Graham Fraser is saying always enter the BTAC and Pappy ballots from the Whisky Exchange at retail price still to be successful. You and I both, Graham. I tend not to be fortunate either. Never won anything in those draws. Emily Chambers is saying, got me hooked on Deanston. Stupid good. I know you've been. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about. We know that you're in bourbon, and that's your foundation.
Mm-hmm.
But you've explored Scotch. You're like me, Jason. I pick that up. That you're one of these guys that's just looking for the next experience. You're loving it all. You want to stay as open-minded as you can and experience as many things as you can, and don't judge an entire genre or distillery or whatever on one approach. How did you end up into whiskey? And then how did that passion, that it must have ignited some kind of passion in you for you to step up and share that on camera, which is not an easy thing to do?
Well, yeah, the camera thing definitely came later, but I think my interest came, it was a moment actually in college. Well, maybe just after college. I was actually drinking one of my favorite go-tos, which was Wild Turkey 101. Me and my buddy were drinking Wild Turkey 101, which is kind of the quintessential bourbon you mix with Coke or another type of soda as you go along. But one time he came over to me and he goes, hey, taste this. And it was just basically straight Wild Turkey 101 on the rocks with nothing mixed. And I'm like, wow, this is so sweet. What is this? He goes, actually, this is just Wild Turkey 101 on the rocks. There's no mix in it. I'm like, are you kidding me? So then I came off rocks, started drinking it straight. Then a bunch of years later, I wasn't really heavy into the whiskey. I was trying it here and there when I would go to a bar. But then I had this very pretty bartender. She came over to the both of us. This was around 2000, I would say 2010 or 11. And I was like, hey, are you guys into bourbon? I was like, yeah, I would definitely like to try some different bourbons. He's like, have you ever tried this? And she pulls out a bottle of Booker's bourbon, which is a Jim Beam product.
Yeah.
Named after the famous Booker. No, that was his bourbon. She poured us a couple glasses, slid it over to us, and I tasted this stuff. And that was the first time in my life I had ever had something uncut, unfiltered, barrel proof, just flavor bomb. And that kind of got me started into trying everything I could. And then that also got me started and then, a few years later when I moved here to Ohio, I didn't really have a lot of friends here, just who I worked with. So on my weekends and on my weeknights, I was sitting at home. I was, tasting some of these bourbons. And then I discovered this whole universe on YouTube. I discovered whiskytube.
So when would this have been? What year would this have been?
So this was 2016.
Okay.
Yeah, so so I discovered YouTube. That's when I discovered channels like you, Chad and Sarah, Rex and Daniel, Scotch 4 Dummies, Scotch Test Dummies, and I was binge watching these guys all day. Especially on the weekends, I was just, trying to learn and taking as much information as I could. I was a sponge, and I wanted to learn everything that I could about all these whiskeys because I was experiencing all these flavors. And then as I kept trying more, I realized I had a very, very sensitive palate. And I give all credit in the world to my grandmother growing up. My Nonna, my Italian grandma, who just turned 96 in August.
Wow.
She cooked all around the house all day, and I got to try a lot of different foods. And I don't know, my palate was very sensitive to the notes I was picking up in whiskey. But the one thing that started me to sit in front of a camera is I noticed that a lot of the channels that I watched when it came to whiskey did not dive heavily in on history. And that's what the drawing factor for me was. I wanted to talk about the distilleries, where it's made, where it came from, how it came about, what goes into the bottle. I wanted to really hit all the different details. So I immersed myself in whiskey history, mainly bourbon in the beginning, with obviously a disposition to explore Scotch more, because I just wanted to learn about all the different types of scotches across Scotland and all the flavor profiles that we spoke of. And that was it. And then here we are a little over 2 years later, and here I am.
And I think you're beyond any chance of getting back out of the rabbit hole. You're pretty deep.
Yeah, I'm very deep, and much to my wallet's demise, Scotch has become one of those. If I find a Scotch I really like or distillery, I have a pretty solid Scotch collection for a bourbon guy, I think.
Well, I'm going to share that little clip with everyone now, just to show people, because when we talk about you exploring Scotch and getting into Scotch, we're only going back about 2 years to share this clip. This clip is only from about 2 years ago. It's quite compelling. And I think I remember you. I think your handle was just Jason C. Before you were Mash and Drum. Could that be right? On YouTube?
Yeah. So I was definitely watching, and I was in the chat rooms as Jason C for a while before I had my chat. Correct.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's right. Okay, I'm going to share this little clip with everyone. If you look at the comments on this video, you will see that there's a lot of people, because over the years on the vPub, if I talk about Jason's channel, if I talk about the Mash and Drum, this is the video I'll point them to because I find it compelling. And I'll just give you this tiny little clip. It's that moment where he's tasting an Islay whiskey for the first time in a Lagavulin, and he's doing it live on camera. And this is why this is gold. I hope you enjoy this few seconds of video.
All right, guys, enough nosing. Let's take a trip to Islay. Happy Monday, everybody. Cheers. Wow, so many things happening. So the front of the palate was this really nice sweet smoke that I got on it. It's a long finish. It's still going. All right, slow down. This sweet and smoky kind of warming finish going down, but before that, I mean, I'm tasting a lot of sweet here, and the smoke isn't as medicinal as I thought it would be. It's actually a really nice sweet smoke, like barbecue. So when people say they get a sweet barbecue on some of these Islay whiskeys, I think now I can understand what they're talking about.
I love it. I absolutely love it. It's that almost like there are so many words in my head that I'm going to have to settle down just to kind of make sense of this, just to untangle it and get it out.
Couldn't process what was happening in my mouth.
Yeah, and that's why I love that video. It's why I love. I've found moments like that right across whiskytube. I've found it with Rob at Whiskey in the Six. Keith the Malted Man Cave. Keith, I don't know why that guy doesn't have 20, 30, 40,000 subs, because when he expresses with such creative passion that it's compelling to watch. Scott Barrett at the Scotch Test Dummies. So many people are able just to sit on camera and just let go. And really, it's so much more than the words. You see the expressions, you see them being animated, and you can deeply pick up the effect that the whiskey's having on them. I just want to mention a quick shout out to Matt and Cesar over at the SoCal Dram Tram. I think I've managed to not jumble that up tonight. Aqvavitae and Mash and Drum couldn't agree more on bourbon. Cesar and I are very young in our journey, and while we love Scotch, both definitely have a wide variety of flavors. Cheers, gents. Thank you very much, Matt and Cesar. Thank you for your virtual dram, guys. Cheers.
I think actually somebody had a question. I don't remember who it was. I think someone had a question earlier. I think it was Jimmy Legg about, do some of the craft producers use pot stills, which I think is an interesting question. A lot of them do. A lot of them have gone back to that old school mentality of creating with pot stills. There's a local distillery here in Ohio called Tom's Foolery, where they use pot stills to make their bourbons and their whiskeys. You have some big producers actually still using pot stills. Woodford Reserve, not many people realize, are using pot stills. They do a mix of column and pot still to blend and create their whiskeys. So yeah, pot stills are still pretty prevalent across the industry of bourbon. Not as much as column stills, especially from the big producers, but pot stills are definitely there. It's a selling point, I think. When a craft producer uses a pot still, it's usually on the bottle, so you'll know.
Yes. Pot. So does what? How would the labeling? What would the description be there? Pot still bourbon.
It says pot distilled usually.
Pot distilled.
Yeah.
Interesting. And it means that it obviously limits the size and the scale. Then they're not running a continuous column still 24/7. They're limited by the size of their stills, aren't they? Jean de la Cuisine has said, great collaboration. This is very entertaining. Cheers to the two of you. Thanks very much for your dram, Jean de la Cuisine. As Michael, Sunday Evening Scotch as well. Cheers, guys. Bourbon is diverse enough. I'd love to see tubers who focus on bourbon do Roy style challenges, but all bourbon American. Find the dusty, find the 35% rye, find the Texas whiskey, etc. Jason, you'd be in a perfect place to start the bourbon blind challenge.
I might just kick this off.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea because if I'm obviously every single channel that takes the Aqvavitae challenge, the template is cast, the mold is cast now. It's going to be the same. For me to suddenly switch that up and change it isn't fair. I already felt that I was being unfair to Bart, and I absolutely was. But he reassured me he was absolutely up for it to do 5 peated whiskies. That's a big, big ask. However, I think a bourbon challenge, that would be interesting.
Yeah,
I'm not putting myself forward for it. I'm not there.
That's a good one. That's a good challenge. I have to start setting that up, I think.
Sounds like a great idea. Great. Craig Watkins is saying, Mash and Drum novice here, loving the discussion tonight. For someone that has yet to own a bottle of bourbon, what would you recommend as a starting point? Eagle Rare 10. I'm just going to say that.
That's actually a really good call out.
Well, it's something that we can get. I think that's the big deal there.
Well, even Eagle Rare by me, like most Buffalo Trace stuff, is getting harder and harder to find, unfortunately. If there was something more available that I would tell you to start with, I always tell people to go with either Woodford Reserve or Elijah Craig.
What about makers? I find makers to be nice because we can buy makers here for £20, £25.
Yeah, makers is a great starter. I just feel like makers for a wheated bourbon, there's something harsh that comes off a little bit about makers that not a lot of people take to, but it is a very good, solid starter as well. Regular Buffalo Trace, if you could find it. That's actually
Buffalo Trace in the UK is brutally thin. It's 40%.
Oh, is it? Okay, yeah.
It's a disaster for us.
Yeah, Michter's is a great starter as well. Old Forrester Signature, another great brand. There's a lot of brands out there that I think you can definitely tackle. But for starters, I always tell people, you know what, try Woodford Reserve first, just because it's so balanced, and then from there you can kind of work out what you like, more and more. Elijah Craig as well, which I think has a little bit more of a punch to it. It's 94 proof, and it has some spice, it has some sweet, it has some cherry, a little bit of a nice spicy finish. Yeah, and then you could kind of work your way from there. So
that was the Elijah Craig that I pulled out when we were chatting the other night. That Elijah Craig, the Eagle Rare 10 that I have, the one I've just been talking about, the Russell single barrel, all of those were gifts from Dwayne Large. And somebody asked if Dwayne's okay. They were asking after him. Dwayne is still around. He's still tuning in. But this year in 2020, he's just decided to take a bit of a step back from whiskytube. I think he found that he was just watching so much of it. But he's still around. He's popping up. His comments are coming in now and again. If you're looking for Dwayne, he's most active on Instagram and Facebook. You can see that he's still active. He's missing desperately his travels this year. He's not been able to make his annual pilgrimage to Islay, and he's struggling like the rest of us are. But reach out to Dwayne through Facebook and Instagram. Somebody's just mentioned that you should also start a wee game called Is It a Kentucky Bourbon? Obviously, clear reference to Is It a Speyside? Now,
you can do that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know how difficult or how easy that would be. Another interesting idea. So people play this game on the channel, Jason, as you know, you've seen it before,
Yep.
and they're playing for this to win a sniper coin, this little glass topper that you can only get by playing this game, either coming on live to play it. If you want to play it live, there's no one in to play it live tonight. It's just Jason and I tonight. But if you want to come on the channel, you want to play a wee game of Is It a Speyside, send me an email, whisky@aqvavitae.com, and I'll add you to the list for nights that I don't have guests on and things. I'll bring you guys in and we can have a wee game. Usually do 2 or maybe 3 of you of an evening. It's just a fun way to kind of think about whiskies and expressions. I appreciate it's firmly in the Scotch realm, but I think, Jason, you're up for a little game of it tonight, aren't you?
I'm ready, man. I'm ready.
Excellent. So that means that you guys in the lounge, you can play in order to win a sniper coin tonight. And since it's just Jason and I, we're only going to have one go at it. What I'll do is I'll give a sniper coin to the first and second people to guess what the whiskey is. I think I'm guessing tonight, Jason, you've got a whiskey on hand that I'm going to be guessing, right?
Correct.
So it doesn't matter if you guess it before me or after me. The first 2 to guess it correctly will win a sniper coin. And hopefully my moderators that are in tonight can keep track and let us know how we're doing.
So, Roy, you just have to refresh my memory on like the types of questions that you kind of ask when playing this game, because I want to make sure I'm not giving away too much information.
The only thing you need to say is yes or no.
Okay.
You're just to say a direct yes or no.
Okay.
There's occasion where it's difficult. We might have to talk it out or something. But generally, I have to try and deduce what the whiskey is by asking up to 10 questions. I hope that's not what it is.
No, it's not. That's not what it is.
Oh, okay. Because I don't want to know.
Yeah, no, the bottle that I picked for you is hidden. So
excellent. Okay, good.
People
have started to guess already.
I'm just taking this out because after you played my video, now I'm in the mood for something peated.
Excellent. You know, I didn't grab those 2. We talked about those, but I can grab them if we want to share it together. Okay, let's get this wee game of Is It a Speyside underway. Everybody that's playing it at home or wherever you are, be ready and guess away. Good luck to me. I'm the one that's asking tonight. I've got 10 questions to try and work out what standard core expression, widely available everywhere, of Scotch single malt whiskey Jason has hiding in the background. And I'm going to start in the true spirit of the game, Jason, and say, is it a Speyside?
Yes.
It's a Speyside, okay. Is it owned by one of the big 4? When we talk about the big 4, we're talking about Edrington, we're talking about Grant's, Pernod Ricard Chivas, and also Diageo. Is it owned by one of those guys?
No.
Oh, it's not owned by one of those guys. Wow. Okay.
At least from the information that I looked up, that I'd studied, that was not one.
Oh, no. There's plenty. There's plenty guys out there. There's plenty guys out there that are not owned by those 4. But it makes it difficult because suddenly you're in the realms of the smaller kind of family-owned ones. So let's ask if is it a Glen?
No, it's not.
It's not a Glen. And it's obviously the temptation for me is to look at this chat, so I'm trying not to. I'll try and keep fixed on you. It's not a Glen. It's not owned by. It's a core range product. Does it have an age statement on it?
Does it? No, it does not.
Okay, so it's a non-age statement.
Non-age stated. Well, let me just double check. But I do not think so. No age on it whatsoever.
Is the ABV is the ABV above 46%?
Yes, it is.
Okay, could it be a Tamdhu?
Ding, ding, ding.
Oh, wow. So Tamdhu batch strength, obviously. Well, I think that's a record for me, Jason.
What do you mean? In getting it or not getting it?
and getting it.
Oh, really? Okay.
And getting to it and that quickly. That was kind of I guess not having if the answer would have been no, it's 46 or below, I would have struggled probably, but above 46%, no Glen, Speyside, you're starting to think the batch strength, it's not 105 from Glenfarclas, that's a Glen, so I started to think of the batch strength. Which batch is that? Is it batch 1 or 2 that you pulled up there?
That's batch 2. That's batch 2.
Yeah. Again, one of these wonderful event whiskies as well, right?
Yep. It's one of my, somebody had sent me a sample of it. And I'm like, oh, what the hell is this? So I went out, and Tamdhu is actually a brand I could get here in Ohio. So I went and grabbed it. Yeah.
Actually, most of the stuff that's coming out of Tamdhu now is pretty excellent. They're 15-year-old. I got to enjoy it last year. It was almost my whiskey of the year if the price was just doing a wee bit. I'm always whinging about the price. I'm like a broken record right now. It could have been there. I was drinking it alongside the Glendronach 15, the Arran 18 and things. I was really enjoying all of those sherry whiskies just at the end of last year. I think the Tamdhu 15 is excellent. The 12, another excellent whiskey, but that batch strength is a special whiskey. It's really great stuff.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. This is actually my second bottle that I've been through with this. It's really great stuff.
Your second bottle, wow.
Second bottle.
So should I be pouring the peaty one? Should I be pouring the...
Yeah,
Laphroaig 16. What are we going to have, the Laphroaig or the Lag or both?
I was actually interested with you to get your take, and I wanted you to maybe school me a little bit, because Laphroaig and Lagavulin, two of my favorite, obviously, peated distilleries, along with Ardbeg. But I wanted to kind of get your take on comparing. So these both are 16-year-old expressions, but I kind of want you to school me a little bit on picking up the different nuances of the type of smoke between Laphroaig and Lagavulin. So I was hoping we could talk about that.
Okay. I'll do the best I can in the form of a discussion, if nothing else. You drive the bus for a little while, and I'll go and grab those off the shelf. I'll be back in a second.
All right, sounds good. I'm driving the bus. All right, so Laphroaig 16 recently came here in Ohio, and it was only about it's like 75, 80 bucks for this. So I grabbed it immediately. This one is 48% ABV, 96 proof, compared to the Lagavulin, which is 43%. Which is 86 proof. So this has quite more of a alcohol punch to it, 10 points higher on the label, but I'm curious to kind of compare them and see, which one I might like better. Is it really about the type of flavor the Lagavulin gives me, or will the higher ABV win out? Macallan Fine and Rare saying very, very different.
Okay. Thank you for taking the wheel for a little bit.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten that we'd spoken about that. I've got Lagavulin 16 and Laphroaig 16. Now, what I will say is that it's a little bit unfair, I think, to the Lagavulin, because if you look here, our Laphroaig is 48% ABV.
Yeah, I was just talking about that. Well, you went to go find the bottle. How it is, the Laphroaig is 10% higher in ABV. But I did want to compare them because they both are 16 years old and have some really... Actually, the color difference on both of these is actually pretty stark.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Lagavulin is more of a legacy malt, right? This was Lagavulin 16 came around in 1988 when single malt was just starting to kind of spread its wings a little bit. So the single malts that came out were speaking very much to a blend market. They weren't speaking to enthusiasts. They weren't speaking to people that were interested in non-chill filtered, higher ABV, natural presentation and things. So this is still a product of its time. It's 43% ABV. It is probably coloured, so that difference that you're seeing in colour there, and all you need to do is look at some other Lagavulin expressions that you know are naturally coloured, such as the 8 and the 12. You can see the Lagavulin is significantly darker than what I believe to be naturally coloured 16 on the Laphroaig, but it doesn't say on the bottle, so we don't know for sure.
That was my question. Is Lagavulin using the old caramel color in the 16?
Yes. And I know that for sure because it's not just because they don't say natural colour on the label. If you go to Lagavulin and do the tour, there are people doing the tour that will explain their use of colour, and they will talk about trying to keep it consistent, and they will talk about the fact that Lagavulin for the last 30 years is not matured in the same casks that it was the previous 30 years. And there's a market expectation in all of these things. I kind of believe that either the wood needs to catch up or the policies need to catch up, and we need to educate people that, because somebody's going to come along one day and make a big story about how Scotch is artificially coloured, and that's detrimental, hugely detrimental in a market that's looking for artisanal, naturally presented product, right? So I think it's dangerous. If it's malt whiskey, my kind of mini manifesto, if you like, is don't take anything away from it. Don't strip it out by chill filtration, and don't add anything by colouring it. But we can kind of step past that just now by kind of comparing these two. Already just pouring these into the glass, I'm struggling to differentiate the smoke. I didn't cover these off, so immediately I've got the room filling up with that lovely, deep, smoky, peaty smell, right?
That's right. I don't think I told you this story, Roy. Actually, I had an Ardbeg Ardbeg Black committee release. A couple of my viewers, I think, probably know this story. I had one of my lights here that was hanging over, and I bumped into it. It fell down on top of my barrel here, and I had about 4 or 5 bottles that fell, and the only bottle that broke was that Ardbeg Black committee release. And my whiskey room smelled like peat for about a week.
Yeah. Did that happen on camera?
No, unfortunately. It was actually happening while I was setting up to do a video, but the camera wasn't rolling yet, unfortunately. So
yeah, because it would have been a crazy good blooper, right, to have.
Absolutely.
Well, that's a shame because it's not a cheap whiskey to lose either. But that kind of thing happens regularly. Mark from Whiskey Whistle once famously just smashed a bottle right on. He just knocked a bottle of Kilkerran straight off the table. Just smashed it, but you left it in. Fair play to him.
I was even thinking to myself after it happened, I'm like, damn, I wish I would have gotten that on camera.
Yeah. Here's what happened to my Ardbeg Black.
Yep.
What I'm struck by,
mm-hmm.
and I don't know, let me you interrupt and say no or agree at any point. But what I'm struck by is that as I nose these,
mm-hmm.
these are both probably similar age in terms of how long they've been open in a bottle, and they've got a similar fill level. They're almost done, both of them. The Lagavulin is actually, despite the lower ABV by 5 full points lower, it's shouting louder. There's more on the nose. The Laphroaig seems to be a quieter, more integrated thing.
You took the words right out of my nose. I think the same. I think the Lagavulin on the nose is presenting more flavor than the Laphroaig is.
It's got more sweeter notes. It's got a little bit more spice, and by spice, I'm talking about like not like sweet. I'm speaking about maybe cooking spices, baking spices, but like nutmeg type spice. Nice aromatic thing. There's a bit of I think that it is a bit salty. There is a bit of salinity.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit more salty than the Laphroaig as well.
But
the smoke is louder on the Lagavulin as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the Lagavulin 16, man, it's coming off. The Lagavulin 16 is coming off way more dessert for me on the nose. I mean, I am getting, you talk about that creme brulee note, but it's like if you took creme brulee and then you put some like sea salt right on top of it, and then added some like grilled. I always get like a really beautiful, like a grilled peach note on Lagavulin, like a grilled nectarine or peach.
Grilled peach, what a great note.
Yeah, love it.
A little sip from the Lagavulin first because it's the lighter one.
Okay.
I always think that because I'm so familiar with the 12, and how much I love the 12. The huge thing for Lagavulin for me, and unfortunately it's very muted in the 16-year-old, is the wonderful effervescence that it delivers. We talked about it last week. We had the Lagavulin 8 in a blind lineup last week, and it's so effervescent, it's almost so fizzy on the palate that it leaves a grittiness. It's like a sugar grittiness on the finish. That's in the 8 and the 12-year-old. On this 16, I'm looking for that, but it's very, very quiet. The finish on this is too short for a 16-year-old whiskey.
I would agree. The finish on the Lagavulin is not very impressive on the 16, at least. I'm in love with that 8. I mean, ever since you showed that video clip and I tried it for the first time, love the 8. That's still...
But again, it's almost like the 8 would be a more fair comparison. That 5% ABV goes a long way. 48% on the 8-year-old brings a lot. It brings more texture. It brings more grip, more of a finish. It stays around for longer. The spice is there. This Lagavulin 16, if you're coming into whiskey, it's a wonderful gateway whiskey because it is softer and more approachable, despite how the nose was playing there. It is much better, and I still love Lagavulin 16. I'll always love it. I owe this whiskey a great, great debt. But tonight, as I sip this, it's clear that there should be more on the palate. There should be more texture there. Should be more coating, and the finish is quite abrupt, I think.
Yeah, I've actually turned more people on to Scotch or to peated Scotch with Lagavulin 16 more than any other.
That's what it's perfect at doing. Yeah, absolutely. Let's go and try a wee bit of this Laphroaig now. It's been a while since I've had this, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to go to and contrast this here. So the nose we kind of called out that it's not as interesting as the Lagavulin 16 nose.
It's quite tropical though.
Oh, absolutely. I'm getting a lot of pineapple.
It's more ashen. There's ash, wood ash.
That's the note from Laphroaig that I picked up on the first time I had it. It's more of an ashy type of smoke rather than a sweet smoke.
Ardbeg is very ashen for me as well.
Yeah, but Ardbeg to me, I get like burnt bacon smoke. I love it.
Oh, wow. So I didn't, all the salt was coming from the Lagavulin on the nose, but on the palate, this is salty.
Oh, it's very salty. Oh, wow.
And those tropical notes are still there, but they're not as ripe. They're kind of a lighter, brighter kind of thing. It goes straight to spice and ash on the finish. This is a much more delicate, subtle thing than I remember. This is quite a nice dram.
I'm surprised at the lack of, like you said, the lack of sweetness that I was getting on the nose. I was waiting for those tropical notes to come through, and they're there. But yeah, it's like you took a slice of pineapple and you drenched it in sea salt.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like you were expecting an overripe pineapple, but it came across as underripe pineapple when you sipped it, right? But it's a cleaner thing. This is a very clean Laphroaig.
Yeah.
Laphroaigs can be quite earthy, and they can be quite rock pool and brine and some slight sourness from time to time. This is a clean thing.
This isn't so, like you say, it's not so in your face. It's probably the most delicate Laphroaig I've ever had, if that makes sense. It's not so...
Absolutely.
It doesn't give me the flavor punch that the quarter cask or the Lore did. This is way more delicate, a little bit more nuanced, but I wouldn't call it super layered either.
No. It's like it... it's like it's almost there's an element missing. I'm not sure what it is. I don't know if there's just not enough kind of barley cereal weight. It's like you're looking for right now, I mean, it's a long finish, but all the finish wants to talk about is salt and salinity.
Yep. I don't know. So you have Lagavulin 16 on one hand, where it's a little bit more interesting on the nose. It's sweeter on the palate. You get that smoke, but not much of a finish. Then you have this one, which is a higher ABV. It's a clean Scotch, a nice flavor profile, but a little bit more salty than sweet. So which one, if you had to, even though this one's a lower ABV, I still might lean towards the Lagavulin, I think.
It's interesting, isn't it? It is interesting. And I have to, Laphroaig for me is, there's a range of Laphroaigs, the triple wood, the quarter cask, this 16-year-old, some others as well that are presented at 48%. And they are valid to me. And then there's other Laphroaigs out there. Unfortunately, they're stalwart, rock solid, been everywhere for as long as you can remember, 10-year-old, and they're select. Four Oak, some other expressions that are out there at 40%. I know in an export market like you, 43, you'll get it at 43, a bit better. Mm-hmm. But we get it at 40. And that strips it away so much that it makes it, for me, a drink in isolation whiskey. Because as soon as you sip it alongside something else, it comes off as thin. Yeah. And I think that's a great shame. Because when you go to Laphroaig and you do the tours at Laphroaig, especially when you can draw from the cask, there are angels literally singing in the warehouse as you get to sip this stuff. And it's just amazing. I mean, there's char floating around in there, and there's just the weight and the texture and the coatingness and the salinity, the brine and the fruit and the dank dunnage notes, the earthiness. You can talk about it for as long as you want. It's a wonderful experience. And it's like so many whiskies, we understand that not everybody wants to sit down and sip at 60% ABV. But it's when you experience that you wonder what gets stripped away as it's conditioned for bottling and kind of mass market consumption. Oh, yeah. But we're enthusiasts, we have to remember that. I'm glad I've got this Laphroaig 16. I think it's a nice Laphroaig to have. It's a nice contrast Laphroaig. If I was to go back for another dram right now between these two, I may lean towards the Laphroaig. But if you said, no, you're going to have the Lagavulin, I'd be just as happy, honestly. Yeah. They are completely, it's lovely to sip them like this because they're remarkably different. Yeah. I think even giving these to Lynn, my wife or something, she would, despite the smoke and the peat, she would be able to pick up just how different these are.
So that's why I want to do this comparison. And, I know a couple people in the chat were saying, on paper, it's not really a fair comparison. And maybe part of that is true. But I think when you do compare these two, both being 16 years old, both being Islays, there are some remarkable differences here. And I was curious as to what I was going to like out of the two, because I haven't really had this one too much. This is one of my favorites. So, yeah, I don't know. There's something about this Laphroaig. I'm going to let it open up, see if it does get sweet.
I think it might grow on you a little bit. I think it's just got that kind of more subtle, delicate thing that you need to spend a bit of time with it. What's interesting in the UK, and I know it's going to be different for you, Jason, is that in the UK, the Laphroaig 16 is quite a bit more expensive than the Lagavulin. We can still pick up Lagavulin 16, 50, 60 pounds, 65 pounds top end. Certain places like Costco in the UK, you can buy Lagavulin 16 for less than 50. But the Laphroaig 16 is quite a bit more expensive than it. I think I paid, I want to say 65 or 70 for it. So it's a little bit more expensive, but it pays you back, giving you that different take on Laphroaig and the extra ABV that really, I think, plays a part on that palate.
I do love the tropical notes in this, and I'm hoping that comes more to the forefront as it opens up on the palate. So,
have you any experience with the Laphroaig cask strength, the 10-year-old cask strength?
Yes, I have had that before, and I was blown away by it. Loved it.
That's Laphroaig. So when I talk about being in that warehouse and able to sip, the 10-year-old cask strength is the closest to that experience. That's a wonderfully rich, complex, go back in and out type whiskey. For us in the UK, we have to go to Laphroaig distillery to buy it.
Oh, really? okay.
It's not distributed widely in the UK. We can get it at auction. Occasionally you'll see an online retailer having a little stock in, but it's a distillery only release, whereas you guys pull it off open shelf. Tom Elmer is saying, he's saying we got a Laphroaig cask strength 10-year-old a few years ago. And Greg's Whiskey Guide is saying that's why the distillery is typically better served by indie bottlers, Roy. Yes, often that is the case. When you start to get into the weeds with these distilleries, you tend to get led down the independent bottlers because you're going to get single cask releases, small batch releases, and certainly have them presented at higher ABV. And it's a completely more immersive thing. Jimmy Legacy in the Mash and Drum. If you are a cask strength man, which I think you are, you will leave that Lager 16 in the dust before too long. Jimmy, you would do yourself, Jason would do himself, we would all do ourselves a disservice if we did that, because we have to remember how influential those whiskies are, how much they spoke to us back in the day. I'll go back to a day in 2009 where my brother and I literally were rendered silent by a bottle of Lagavulin 16. And I'm not talking about the first pour, the first dram. We knew what we were getting into, but we were 2 drams in, 3 drams in when we really started to communicate with it. And I just remember thinking, my whiskey journey has changed today because I was on record as saying I can't enjoy Islay whiskies. And now I'm in danger of spending too much time sipping Islay whiskies. It's difficult when you're in the mood. It's difficult to step off Islay. I find that anyway.
I think there at some point, I mean, Jimmy Legg, I do agree. I am a cask strength man, as a lot of whiskey enthusiasts are. We do like getting that full flavor, but I ran into the same issue with bourbon too. You know, you get so much into the Elijah Craig barrel proofs of the world and the Wild Turkey rare breeds and all the special releases that come out at full proof and cask strength to get all that full flavor. You do sometimes lose sight of the nuance that could be just a really good 90 proof bourbon. You know, I think a lot of them that are left on the shelf, that I think the same can go for Scotch. I mean, Lagavulin 16, I would probably reach for the Lagavulin 12 cask strength more often than not. But sometimes, every now and again, I just like going back to this bottle. It's just something about it.
I have to say that Jimmy, I bump into people regularly around me, whiskey clubs, festivals, general chit-chat about whiskey, and you often hear the phrase, not verbatim, but something along the lines of 40%, 43% ABV whiskies are anemic to me now. I just can't drink them anymore. I'm not interested if it's not 46, 48, 50% and above. That's where I need to drink my whiskey. And my answer to that, and I'm not suggesting it's going to work for everyone, but my answer to that, in my experience, take a break. Just take a break from whiskey for a little while. I'm not talking about dry July, sober October nonsense. I'm talking about just a short break, a few days, a week or so. Let your palate adjust a little bit and then come in fresh on a Laphroaig 10. It might be a Lagavulin 16, whatever it is. Even if it's unpeated whiskies that you're talking about, and reconnect with the whiskies, you'll be amazed that you can actually pick up flavors just by giving your palate a chance to kind of reset a little bit. I don't know if you would agree, Jason, or if you think that perhaps you're stuck at the high end.
No, I would. I think it actually just happened to me. Well, not super recently, but maybe about 6-7 months ago. I got a couple blind tastings from somebody that's one of my Patreons and that wanted me to be part of a tasting that her bourbon group was doing. And most of the stuff that she sent me were lower proof offerings from different distilleries. There were a couple of high proofers mixed in there, but most of them kind of were right at that 80 proof, 90 proof mark. And, you know, I'm sipping these along and I'm like, wow, this one definitely seems like a lower proof, but man, it's actually, you know, it's doing something for me here. It's got a good finish. And then when I found out what they were, I'm like, wow. So I think that kind of reset my brain and my palate to go back to some whiskeys that aren't cask strength, and just there's a beauty to just sipping something that's not gonna, light your palate on fire every time. As much as I love Elijah Craig barrel proof, I'm not going to drink it every single day. There are times I like just drinking a 100 proof bottled and bond or, going to something at 95, 90, 90 proof sometimes. If it's got a good enough flavor and it's a high quality distillery, a high quality American whiskey, I think there's something to be said for all of that.
I think that says a lot. We can get distracted by ABV. We can get distracted by, as we've proved and talked about tonight, preconceptions. So it's nice to employ these little levers and, mechanisms in order to adjust things and reset. See, before we go into the quiz, Jason, I want to talk about our community.
Sure.
Tim at Donner Pass Whiskey is in, and he's saying, really wish I was home so I could have a dram with you guys and everyone. In a hospital waiting room instead. Wife is in the post-op ward. We'll get to see her in about 30 minutes. Tim, I don't know what's taking your wife, why she's in that post-op ward right now, but I wish you and certainly your wife a speedy recovery, and I hope she's very, very well when you do get to see her. I'm going to raise a glass to my friend and his wife, Tim, Donner Pass Whiskey. Cheers, my friend. Slant you.
Yeah. Donner and I have collaborated a few times. He has sent me some great drams, and he's always involved in my blend to get in every year. So thank you so much for that, Donner, and really hope your wife is well.
I remember, and we'll use Tim as an example of the community. I remember the first few discussions I had with Tim, and I'm going back more than 2 years, 2.5 years at least. And he talked about Donner Pass, that area in the States, and where he got his name from, sent me a really nice message and things, and got to know him back then. And that's true of the vast majority of the people that are in tonight. I get really annoyed when I don't remember names, but there's so many aliases and things. But I've got to know so many of these people, and they're spread right across the world. And through their passion for whiskey, it brings them to Scotland. So inevitably, we get a chance to cross paths here in Scotland as well. And I've met so many of them. Jonathan Flowers is in here tonight. Precarious Dave and Neil Cochran. These are two guys. These are thick as thieves, these two guys from our local Glasgow Whiskey Club as well. Friends of mine now. Greg's Whiskey Guide over in France. Whiskey Jason in Germany. Tabitha Adams, she's in Brighton. Red Sox 367. I don't know where you are, buddy, but I bet if you hang around long enough, I will discover where you are. I think we are blessed with one of the most amazing communities. When you got into the Whiskey Tube thing, were you aware of that? Was it one of the things that attracted you, or was it a surprise when you came in?
I think so, because of so as you called out earlier, I was Jason C in the chat room for a long time, and I was developing relationships in those chat rooms with some of the folks that are watching me today, which I thought was incredible. I think the biggest thing that really made me realize how special the Whiskey Tube community is, and I can't remember what specific event it was, but I remember Scott and Bart doing a fundraising event before I had a channel, and the way the community pulled together, the way everyone supported them, and what their goal was I thought absolutely incredible. And the one thing that amazes me about, and not just the whiskey community, but whiskey in general, but I think it's more magnified when you talk about Whiskey Tube and everyone that watches. I think the greatest thing that I found and it's no matter where you're from in the world, no matter what your religion, your race, whatever it may be, everyone comes together to enjoy whiskey, and we could talk as friends and as like people that we've never met before, but we know each other in the chat room. We know each other by handles. We know each other by nicknames, and the inside jokes that come in. Like as you move from channel to channel, every channel has kind of their own thing, and everybody knows what it is. I think that part of it to me is incredible, because I can go to any chat room on any channel and see a lot of the same people just hanging out, talking whiskey, enjoying a dram, everyone saying hi to each other like they've known each other for years. I think that's the real beauty of it, and it's not something that I see in a lot of other communities through YouTube.
It's so refreshing to have a space where we're not divided. We're not focusing on the things that divide us, whether it's politics or religion or it's race or it's whatever. We don't care how you eat and pray and vote. And whiskey just, it focuses on the things that unite us, and it lets you, that really refreshing thing that you sit down with somebody that you're diametrically opposite of, politically or whatever it may be, and you see through whiskey, you see the person. And it's almost like the whiskey has introduced you, and then you're chatting over whiskey and chatting over whiskey, and then suddenly you realize that the whiskey has stepped back. It's not the forefront. It's not the most loud in the conversation anymore. It's stepped back and it's become like a backdrop and just allowing you to be. And I know that this is hyperbolic. I know that it's kind of exaggerative, but I have experienced this time and time and time again. And you can't tell me it's because we're all happy drunk together and things, because that's absolutely not true. The Whiskey Tube community, we are very rarely, I think, I'm speaking about your channel, I'm speaking about Scotch Test Dummies, I'm speaking about my channel, the people that are putting out these live streams regularly, Scotch for Dummies, we are not hanging out and getting drunk. We are tasting whiskey, we are not drinking. We're using it for that shared experience and that connectedness. And I think that the longest, I keep saying it, the longer we can preserve it, the better. And I preach, brother, I understand exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
And I'm very, very glad that you feel the same way about it as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I've met some of the greatest people in the world through just doing this and collaborating. I mean, me getting to meet you and everybody else, you know, down last year in Texas, just to see the interactivity. It was like we all knew each other for years and we had never met before.
That's right.
That's really kind of the beauty of it. And I think that goes for the same as the people in the chat. I mean, if a lot of these, you know, a lot of the viewers sometimes that I run into, like in a store, I mean, they'll come right up to me, and you know, there's no sort of preconceived notions about anything. It's all about the whiskey and talking about the passion and talking as friends. And again, just like you said, I think in today's day and age, I think there is a call to everyone shutting off life a little bit, sitting down with a dram, sharing it with friends, family, people with opposing views, whatever it may be. And you could just kind of slow down life for a little bit and sit and chat and enjoy the whiskey and enjoy the community. And
especially when we live in a world where we select our Twitter feeds and our Facebook like pages and everything around the things that we are already invested in and believe in, and we end up in that big bubble. We end up in our own little echo chambers, don't we? But then whiskey is this great thing that just breaks that shit down. It doesn't demand that you define or put borders up anywhere. It lets you reach beyond those little kind of bubbles and chambers. And I think that is super, super healthy. Also, as you say, that gives you that kind of little pocket of time where you just get to switch off and relax and step into a world that's going to not let you have to worry about the stresses, the arguments, and all of that. I think everybody starts to feel that. And I think that for some reason, then it's wonderful. Whiskey Tube community, the Whiskey Tube creators have to be applauded for this, obviously. Honestly speaking, I think they do, because ego is left at the door. You imagine Daniel and Rex, 600,000 subscribers they are coming up on, right, over the two channels.
Yep.
And they reach out to the channels that visited them last year at in 2018 at the Bastards Ball and say, hey, do you want to invite some of your friends along and bring some other channels that you would want to be involved in this kind of thing as well? We'll make it a bit bigger this year. That open collaborativeness, that lack of trying to be competitive and no egos, it's very, very refreshing in today's landscapes, I think.
I would agree. The collaboration was actually a huge part, one of the parts that surprised me when starting my channel. Channels from all over reaching out to me. Hey, you want to come on? Let's get some viewers for your new channel. And I mean, it was amazing. And I try to do the same thing for other channels now when there's a new one to come on. I'm talking to a few new channels that are going to be on with me on my usually Wednesday night slot, just to talk whiskey and get to learn more about them as collaborators, as content creators, what they like in whiskey. And then, you know, then from there, they can build their own community within the community, and people will get to know their inside jokes and get to know their palate and get to share their knowledge of whiskey together. And that's really the beauty of the whole thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's amazing. And I know that I am a bit of a broken record and I talk about it a lot, but I'll never tire of talking about it. And I think it's important to talk about. Listen, I know that I've been ignoring the chat a lot tonight. The lounge has been kind of discussing amongst themselves. I hope you don't mind. If you do want to interact with me, much the same as you, if you're picking this up on the replay, anybody that's missed a comment or a chat or something in the lounge tonight, anybody that's picking this up on the replay, leave a comment underneath the video, and I promise I will reply to you and engage with you in the spirit of exactly what I've been evangelizing about.
Exactly.
You guys in the community. Jock B, that looks like a new name, Jock, but it's nice to welcome you in. He's saying Aqvavitae. Loving the YouTube community and collab. Also enjoyed you and Jesse from Still It the other night with whiskey tasting on the collab app. Fantastic. I was able to go and I was caught short. I never really shared that enough. I never shared it on social media. When Jesse and I were doing the collaboration, I thought it was a pre-record, but it ended up being a live stream. But him and I got together to talk about whiskey community, to talk about tasting and things. And again, another guy down in New Zealand, slightly on the cusp there because he's doing home distillation and things like that, but putting out fantastic content and building a wonderful community around what he's doing as well. And then bringing it together in this kind of people that are interested in distilling at home, people that are interested in just enjoying the whiskey, how it's made and everything. And a great guy, Jesse. We got to hang out with Jesse last year as well. He was a treat. And Greg's Whiskey Guide is saying, no problem, Roy. Great discussion, great show. Thanks, Greg. Sunday Evening Scotch Michael is saying, the lounge is taking care of itself. As per usual, no worries, my friend. You guys have been having a great discussion. Thank you so much. Malt Monk, that's Justin down south. He's saying, question for Jason. What's the best 3 bourbons that you cannot live without in your collection? Quick fire 3 bourbons. Can you do it?
Quick fire 3. Okay. William LaRue Weller from BTAC.
Often on allocation, even in the States, right?
Very high allocation, but that bottle from BTAC, one of the most consistent, amazing releases that come out every year. Next. There's so many.
I know.
Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. And it doesn't, I'm not going to really kind of go into any specific bottle. I just as a whole, I love that stuff. And probably next up would be my Wild Turkey Master's Keep 17-year-old bottled and bond. That's a new release that came out this year.
Master's Keep. So that's another one that's hard to get hold of, though, right?
Lately, yeah. And probably as another one I'll throw in there is my Old Carter Batch 5 that I reviewed recently, and I think it's one of the best bourbons I've tried. Easily some of the top 10 bourbons I've ever tried ever. So
I think when Jason graces our shores, he's going to be shocked at just how little bourbon and selection of bourbon we can actually get our hands on. Certainly in the retails and the distribution supply chain and things like that. I know that online we can get a wee bit more, but if you suffer from allocation in the States, you can imagine how difficult it is for us here, right?
Well, let me ask you the same question. What are the 3 Scotch that you have right now that you couldn't live without?
I'll let a rabbit out of a hat right now because I always go along the lines of putting 3 bookend scotches out there to show the diversity of flavour. So I want a peated Islay, Lagavulin 16. Okay. I want a big sherry bomb. I want something that brings the rich, decadent sherry spice, the dark cooked dried fruits. Glendronach 15, my whiskey of the year last year. Just amazing stuff. I know it's a bit more expensive.
Bought that after you proclaimed that whiskey of the year, and you are right. It's stellar stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's not, people complain about it not being the old stuff. I remember reading Serge Valentine's review at the time and things, and everybody talked about it being different. I said, I know we can't compare it to what it used to be. We have to compare it to its peers. And that thing punches above its weight regularly. Glendronach Revival, bit of PX Pedro Jimenez, sweetness, syrupiness in there, wonderful stuff. So then you've got that wonderful contrast of the Islay Peat and the Speyside Sherry. And if you're really feeling experimental, pour a glass of the Glendronach and then put a teaspoon of the peated whiskey in there as well, just for kicks.
Okay.
We don't have to be precious about every single dram that we pour. And then to let the rabbit out of the hat, you're going to want to put in a clean, super clean, fresh, delicate, complex ex-bourbon matured only to fill to that third place in the trifecta. And then you would pick something easy to get your hands on, like a Glenmorangie 10. But more recently, my favorite for that slot has become Glencadam 10. It's fabulous stuff. More about that in an upcoming video. I don't want to waste too much. But there you go. That's what I would recommend, because it gives you that broad spectrum of really kind of bookend type flavor profiles. Roy and Jason, so much fun. Thanks for answering some of my many questions. Jimmy, I think there are more than one of you. The way that you can listen to the chat, interact, comment on everything, make funny jokes. I think there is more than one Blair Conrad out there. There is more than one Jimmy Legg. It's always a pleasure to have you along, my friend. And thank you so much for your virtual dram. Cheers.
Well, Roy, I think the chat's getting ready. You want to get to your quiz?
I want to get to the quiz. And yeah. I want you to tell me what's my last dram to pour for the night. I think I've gone over. I'm reusing a glass now. So I'm either going to go for one of the bourbons. So it's going to be the Knob Creek, or it's going to be the Russell's single barrel. I know what you're going to pick.
You do?
Yeah, I think I'll put it in my hand to see if I get it right. It's in my hands right now.
I'm going to say the Knob Creek.
Oops.
just because it's a 15-year-old one.
Listen, I did a vPub with Chad and Sarah earlier in the year,
yep.
And this blew me back in my seat. It was incredible.
If that was a regular standard 9-year, I would say the Russells. But if you have a 15-year Knob Creek, definitely crack that baby open.
Okay, let's go with this, and let's ask people not to throw their parachutes on and jump out for the quiz. Hang out a little while, play the quiz. Jason's going to stay along and play the quiz. Of course, my quiz tends to be a little bit Scotch focused, honestly speaking. A couple of world whiskey questions in there, often an asshat question, often a banana skin, but it's all multiple choice and it's all for a bit of fun. You're only playing against yourself. There are no prizes. Please hang out for a wee bit more fun time on the quiz. I'll try and pick out your scores as we go along. I'll try and hang out with you guys in the lounge a wee bit as well. I know I've been ignoring you a wee bit tonight. I hope that's okay. Jason, are you ready to play along, my friend?
I'm ready, man.
Good. I put this together today. I hope it's in a decent shape. Jimmy Legg is saying you couldn't drag me away. I'm very, very glad about that, Jimmy.
Awesome.
Okay, good luck, everybody. 10 questions. Do the best you can. The pass mark is usually 5 out of 10. I would say that that's a reasonable pass mark tonight. I've not mentioned the E word at all tonight, but I think most of the questions are relatively easy. I hope. Good luck, everybody. Question 1. Diageo's for small distilleries include Royal Lochnagar, Glen Spey, Nakando, and which other? So Diageo have, and I'm talking about distilleries that are less than 2 million litres. So they're small distilleries. Which one is small of these 3? A, Talisker, B, Dalwhinnie, or C, Oban? Zach Andrews has bought a dram as well in honour of Jason. Cheers, guys. Another great stream. Zach, missed you this year, buddy. I've got to meet with you last 2 years in Texas. But I've got a feeling that our paths will cross again, buddy. Thanks for your virtual drama. And until then, I'll raise this wee glass of Knob Creek and say cheers, Zach. Jason, do you know the small Diageo distillery that I'm talking about here? Very small. It's actually impossible for Diageo to expand this distillery.
Really? And why is that? Well, I don't want to give it away yet, but I'm sure you'll
It's because of its position and where it is constructed. It cannot become any bigger than it is.
So based on that, I would guess it's either Talisker or Oban, just being the those maritime malts that are on the coast.
Okay, commit then. Commit between Talisker and Oban.
I'll say Oban because I don't know much about it.
Superb. Absolutely. Oban is confined in the town that it's in, the town of Oban. The distillery itself has houses and buildings all around it, so that the only way it could expand is to go out into the sea, I guess, or to move location, and then it would no longer be Oban. So there you go. Nakando and Glen Spey are both about 1.4 million litres, reasonably sized certainly bigger than Glengoyne, but still small for Diageo. And Royal Lochnagar is their smallest at 500,000 litres. Oban is about 800 or 900,000.
Had a lot of C's in the chat, so people are doing good so far.
We have a super knowledgeable lounge. We really do. It's quite incredible how they score. Question 2. The original Glengyle distillery, obviously Coquerin, was built in 1872, but how many years did it spend closed? I'm talking about the 20th century closure of Glengyle Coquerin. Was it silent for 39 years, 59 years, or 79 years? A, 39, B, 59, or C, 79 years. Scotch on the Bayou, Leanne is in. She's saying 1 for 1. Full house already. Aqvavitae, where I had my first ever dram of Scotch. Oban Distillery is Leanne's. She did an Instagram post of that quite recently, Leanne. I read your post. Fantastic stuff. Oh, Bruno Martins is in. Good to see you, Bruno. You'll be guessing here as well, Jason, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. I'd probably just go right in the middle. I'll say, I'm going to guess B, say 59 years.
You're going to hedge your bets. I have to say that quite a lot of people in the chat think the same. And I can tell you that it was built in 1872. It closed its doors in is it right to say this? I won't. I'll wait just a second. Get your answers in.
So we're talking about the early 1900s, I would imagine, is when it closed.
Yes, I'm just gonna. I'll double check so that I'm not going to make a blunder of it. But the answer, and there are a lot of people in the chat that guessed 79 years closed.
Wow, that's incredible. And then
I think it was 19.
Then it reopened as Kilkerran. So as recent as the 2000s.
So yeah, 1925 it shut its doors and it opened again. And this is why it's one of my most anticipated whiskies this year will be the 16-year-old from Coquerin that they're releasing this year. I have a sample of it in a box back there. I'm desperate to try it. They opened in 2004 after full 79 years. It was a shooting club. It was a petrol station. It did all sorts of things in that time. And Janie Mitchell managed to revive it again and bring us. Thank God they did, because the stuff, as you know from the Blind Challenge, the stuff that's coming out of Coquerin.
That type of history to me is fascinating. I love hearing stuff like that. That's fascinating.
So you are going to enjoy the rest of the quiz because there's a theme running through the quiz tonight. And you might start to pick up on what the theme is for most questions. It's going to be focusing on kind of history and closed distilleries.
Okay.
Question 3, which of these distilleries don't feature in this year's Diageo special releases? Big news recently, of course. They've been talking about it for a few weeks now, but their product is actually started to be delivered. I get my delivery just in today. I'm really excited to try the special releases this year. I usually buy 1 or 2 bottles from them. But what is not featured in the special releases? What doesn't have an appearance? A, Colilla. B, Dufton. C, Dalwhinnie. Actually, is saying, please don't talk about the Coquerin 16. We'll never get it. There will be a big enough release of Coquerin 16 for enthusiasts to get their hand on it. That it has to be. It has to be. Dancing Midgie is in, you star. Good to see you, Glenn. Always wonderful to welcome you here. I hope you're doing very well. James Alsop is saying, if it only closed 50 years ago, we might still be able to track down some 70s releases, if only. We can dream. So most people are going, the chat are leaning in a certain direction. Are you aware of the Diageo special releases?
I am.
I'm not suggesting it's anything like your BTAC.
Yeah, it's. I actually went over these on my live stream. I do a small segment when I go through whiskey news.
Yes.
And yeah. This was one of the subjects. So I feel like I should know this.
Commit to an answer. Then, what do you think? What is not?
I remember there being a Dalwhinnie in there. I think it's the Kalila. I don't remember seeing Kalila if I remember correctly.
2 out of 3 for you, Jason, tonight.
There you go.
Caol Ila is absolutely right. Sometimes in the Diageo special releases, we'll get a Caol Ila. Sometimes an unpeated Caol Ila, part of their Highland unpeated malt campaign, will come out in the special releases. But this year, no Caol Ila. We do have a Dufton, a 70-year-old singleton of Dufton, and we have a 30-year-old Dalwhinnie. So if you answered A, give yourself a point. My Bourbon Journey is in. Good to see you. And My Bourbon Journey is scoring 0 for 3 tonight. Listen, buddy, I know you'll be just kind of guessing. Don't worry about it. Hang around and see if you can get.
So, Roy, you'll be proud of Scott. He did a blind tasting of scotches pretty much for the first time on his live stream on Tuesday, and he found a couple that he actually really liked. So, kudos to him, man.
Excellent. I wonder who's evangelizing Scotland to Scotch then. That's nice. I got to hang out with Scott briefly earlier in the year. We were on a live stream together. I think it was the Whiskey Crusaders live stream, Scott, if I remember well. We were hanging out together.
Yep.
Certainly good to welcome you in here, buddy. Okay, question 4. Which island distillery owes its rebuild and rebirth? You'll like this question, Jason.
Okay.
In 1960 to locals after 60 years of closure. So this was local landowners took it upon themselves out on this western Scottish island to take this distillery and rebuild it after it was shut for 60 years. I'm going to give a bit of a clue here and say that this distillery in recent years has grown its output 150% in the last decade. It's grown from strength to strength. Are we talking about A, Arran, B, Jura, or C, Tobermory? An island distillery that owes its rebirth to local landowners. Incredible stuff, right?
To local landowners. That's really interesting. I don't know if I would know that offhand. Let's see. I don't know enough about Arran and Tobermory. I mean, I have seen, if I had to guess, I've seen a lot of Jura stuff coming out. So maybe I would guess Jura.
Guessing Jura. Jason's guessing B, Jura.
Guessing on this one. I love the question though.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things. It's obviously that's come from a passion project, a decision to say, look, there's a demand coming back for whiskey. Let's claim it. Let's make it part of our identity, a part of our island. But am I talking about Arran, Jura, or Tobermory?
I mean, it could be. I mean, maybe I'm wrong in that fact because I'm thinking of what I've seen lately. Maybe I should be thinking about something that I haven't seen a lot, which for me would be Tobermory. So maybe
have you not just been telling us not to second guess?
That's true. So I'm going to stick with Jura. I'm not second guessing.
Oops, absolutely, it is indeed. It is indeed Jura. This slide hasn't updated. I'm sorry, but it is. The answer is B for Jura. Anybody that's put in B is absolutely right. Local landowners decided to get together and revitalize Jura after 60 years of closure. Right. And despite it not being the enthusiast favorite because of the crazy releases, the non-age statement releases, the confusing range, often the bottling not representing what Jura can produce. I've got an independent, a Douglas Lane Jura through there that is incredible. It's very, very interesting. It's the type of thing that you would probably never get from Jura. But there you go. That was brought back to life by locals in 1960. Jura is the answer. B.
Very nice.
Here's a picture of a distillery. Not the prettiest distillery. We're not talking cottage distilling here, are we? Yep. This is a big industrial site. Jason, I know that you're struggling here, but are we looking at A, Port Dundas? Sorry, are we looking at A, Port Dundas, B, Cameron Bridge, or C, North British? I have to say that, Jason, you should be able to answer this if you knew which of those distilleries were still in existence. Based on the theme tonight, this should be a giveaway question for people who know which of those are still in existence. All of the options tonight are grain distilleries. Yep. In Scotland, we only have 7 grain distilleries still in existence. All huge, well, for the most part, huge concerns. Starlawn, Loch Lomond are a little bit smaller. But are we looking at Port Dundas, Cameron Bridge, or North British?
Never heard of North British, so maybe that's not it. I would probably go with Port Dundas. Well, Cameron Bridge. Have I heard of Cameron Bridge? Yeah, Cameron. That place actually from that picture, and I'm sure it's just the angle. It looks like it's like some kind of like prep school from the outside.
I can say that Cameron Bridge is a Diageo distillery. It's still very much in operation out on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Or towards the East Coast over in Fife. North British is Edinburgh, still very much in operation. But Port Dundas is closed. And in fact, the buildings that we're looking at, I believe all of these buildings now to be flattened. They no longer exist. Huge urban redevelopment going on there in Glasgow, just north of the M8 motorway. Port Dundas has lost. It's a closed distillery now, and that's what we're looking at there.
There you go.
The kind of clue tonight to help you along was the theme being along the lines of closed distilleries. Question 6. How many malt whiskies featured in Mash and Drum Jason's Blind Challenge? How many malt whiskies did we put in the lineup? 3, 4, or 5? Now, Jason, you're in trouble if you get this one wrong, right?
I think I am.
I'm looking at the scores at the halfway point here. 4 out of 5 for Neil Cochrane. Thomas Elmer. Thomas struggling tonight on 1. Robert Fredrickson, superb on 4 out of 5. Lindsay Holman, 3 out of 5. Gary Cobb, 2 out of 5. Akshay, 2. Jimmy Legg, 4 out of 5. Great score, Jimmy. Any 5 out of 5s? Oh, Kresimir is already on 5 out of 5. Well done, sir. He's got his pass mark. Superb. And Andrew Butler is thanking me for the clue. Usually there's a wee kind of freebie, a slip up and make a mistake somewhere, Andrew, right? Jason, you're going to have to tell us what the answer is here. How many malt whiskies did you have in your 5-dram lineup?
Malt whiskies. Well, yeah, I should know this. Single malts. Do the blended malts count?
I'm just asking how many malt whiskies.
I think it's I want to say 4.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. The Taiwanese is a single malt. The Omar is a single malt whiskey from Taiwan.
Yep.
Clynelish, of course, Scotch single malt. Kilkerran, Scotch single malt. And the Naked Grouse is not a blend. It's a blended malt. It's fully malt whiskey. It's all malt whiskey that's in there.
There you go.
Red, of course, being a blended. So 4 out of 5 were malt whiskies. So if you answered B for 4, give yourself a point. As we roll into question 7, which of these closed distilleries was a Flora and Fauna release? Which of these have we seen as a Flora and Fauna? Glenurry Royal, Glenalbin, or Pittyveich? A, Glenurry Royal, B, Glenalbin, or C, Pittyveich? I think this is a difficult question right up until you see the answers. I think I would not expect Jason to know this. In fact, if Jason did know this, I would be super impressed.
I'm actually going to say Pittyveich for this, because the only reason why I would say that is there is a couple of, I've seen a bunch of Diageo releases claiming that they're getting these releases and these casks using from Pittyveich. So including a Forager's Keep, which is I think a 40-year-old Scotch that was released for I think $300 or $400. So that would be my guess. Actually, is Pittyveich.
Well done. Absolutely, we're talking about Pittyveich.
There you go.
Always talk about Pittyveich being an underperformer, something that wasn't that great a whiskey. I have to say that when I did try a Pittyveich, and it was the Flora and Fauna 12-year-old, I thought it was okay. I quite enjoyed it. I didn't understand what all the fuss was about. Lots of people didn't like Pittyveich, and Pittyveich makes an appearance again, as it did last year, as a 29-year-old. Now it's coming out as a 30-year-old in the special releases, and it's cheaper than the 21-year-old Mortlach. I think it's a 30-year-old, yes. Quite incredible. In fact, the 21-year-old Mortlach is actually more expensive. Mm-hmm. I think I'm probably spoiling a question that might appear later on in this quiz, so I better shut up now and ask question 8.
Well,
Fedi, or I believe the pronunciation, if Charlie's in tonight, she can correct me, or Rolf, or Andreas, any of my Norwegian friends. Fedje, I think it is a Norwegian distillery located where? On an island closest to Scotland, B, inside the Arctic Circle, or C, in the city centre of Oslo? B, on an island closest to Scotland, A, on an island closest to Scotland, B, inside the Arctic Circle, or C, in the city centre of Oslo. I fully imagine, as I would be, Jason, if I read this question, you would be guessing.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely guessing.
This is a small distillery in Norway. They are producing mostly gin with botanicals local to them, but they're also now producing organic malt whiskey. Very much along the lines of artisanal style, very small batch. And I think the pronunciation is Fedje. What would you guess? The island closest to Scotland, inside the Arctic Circle, or in the city centre of Oslo? Scott Kilted Moose is in, and he thinks it's in Oslo, as does Kresimir. Richard Hall thinks it's inside the Arctic Circle. Akshay thinks it's A, which is closest to Scotland, as does Bruno. Bruno Martins thinks the same.
Yeah, I would probably lean toward. I'm not going to say C. Usually, smaller distilleries are not in the heart of cities, so I would guess A or B. I mean, inside the Arctic Circle, that's a pretty vast area. I don't know. I would lean towards A, just because, if you're going to open a distillery, why not open a new distillery that's close to Scotland on an island where you're getting the proper weather, the proper conditions, good terroir. I don't know. If I was a betting man, that's where I would want to put a new distillery. Just
like you did on the blind challenge, you're killing the quiz as well. Absolutely well done. Neil Cochran is saying, where's Rolf when you need him? I saw him in earlier tonight, I think, but he's perhaps not around now. And Graham Fraser's calling me out, saying that this is an asshat question. Indeed, this is a wee bit, but I think it's interesting. And I've got a picture here that I can show you here. This is the island of Fedje itself.
Oh my
God. If you can see, I mean, there are areas of Norway that are closer to mainland Scotland, but those islands up in the north there, I don't know if anybody can see my cursor, but these islands that are up in the north, that's Shetland Islands there. And then further down, that's the Orkney Islands. So that's the island of Fedje is closest to Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
So if you answered A, you've got yourself a point as we roll into second from last.
Sweet.
According to the 2020 Malt Yearbook, who owns Scotland's biggest malt distillery by capacity? Jimmy Legg, this question's for you. I know you always love a capacity question. I'm simply asking you, what is Scotland's biggest distillery? Yes, but you need to also know who owns it. Who owns the biggest distillery in Scotland? A, William Grant. B, Pernod Ricard, which is Chivas Brothers, of course, or C, Diageo. Really enjoying this Knob Creek. Is this the one? Tell me, is this the one you get peanut butter on?
Yeah, usually there's usually a big peanut funk in that. Absolutely,
almost like a sweet roasted peanut butter.
Correct. Yep.
Absolutely tremendous.
Yeah, and those 15 and 14-year-old picks, I mean, they are just really, I mean, some of them are just incredible and such a value too. Most stuff that comes out these days, when you see a 14, 15-year-old age statement on a bottle, you're paying at least upwards of $140 to sometimes $250 for something like that in today's market, and you could still grab those on the shelf for about $45, $50. So
every it's like my nose has been opened, my eyes are watering. It's just like it literally, this whiskey goes in and grabs every nerve ending that you own and gives it a good shake.
That's very true.
It's quite amazing. It's 120 proof. I mean, it's I was going to say it's lighter than the stag that we've had, but it's still incredibly powerful. Would you be guessing this one as well?
No, I actually know this one.
Fantastic.
At least
Give me your answer.
I mean, I think most people would want to go towards Diageo, but I think the biggest. This was in something I was reading. I think it's. I think the distillery, I want to say, is Glenfiddich, and I think it's owned by William Grant. So unless that's changed, I'm not sure.
Banana Skin. So Glenfiddich are going through a huge expansion right now that will make them the biggest malt distillery in Scotland, but they've had huge amount of delays and things to the point that I don't know if we can say they are the biggest yet. So that's why I've written, according to the 2020 malt yearbook, it is actually Glenlivet. At 21 million litres, owned by Pernod Ricard.
21 million liters they're doing a year?
Yep, of malt batch produced from pot stills, 21 million litres. The Macallan expansion is huge. They went from around 8, 9 or something to 15 million. Glenlivet, they're talking about going from 12, 13 up to 22, 23 million litres. I don't know just how big their expansion is going to be. It's huge.
That's crazy.
Now, all of this whiskey, the expansion has been going on for years, Jason, and the blend market is still flat. So it's going to be interesting to see where all this mature malt ends up, right?
Yeah, and I'll be curious to see when all these expansions are done throughout these distilleries, like who's going to, what kind of quality. I mean, a lot of people I know have been getting on Macallan they think since they built that whole distillery, their quality has come down. Or is it just going to get better? Who's going to end up the biggest after all this is said and done? It's really interesting to see the growth and these expansions. The same thing's happening in American whiskey too. A lot of the big distilleries have had to expand with the amount of interest and the amount of demand for whiskey.
A lot of discussion going on about demand and about the long-term shape of the demand and everything. And I keep kind of saying to our community that if you're a drinker, it doesn't really matter. It only really is going to affect you if you are an investor, somebody who's going to be nervous of sudden dips in price.
There you go.
But if you're drinking the whiskey, don't worry about it. There's lots of whiskey maturing right now. There's lots of whiskey coming onto the market now. And there's lots of whiskey being provided for us in the future as well.
Correct.
How are you scoring, buddy? You're doing quite well.
Yeah, I'm at 7 out of 9. I got 2 wrong, so I'm doing pretty good.
Superb.
Yep.
We've got Jimmy Legg complaining, saying he doesn't like me anymore. He's only on 6 out of 9. Jimmy, you're still on a pass mark. Don't worry, my friend. Robert Fredrickson also on 6. Bruno Martin's 4. You need this one, Bruno, to get a pass mark. Let's see. Have I made the last question an ASHAT question? I usually do, don't I? Diageo special releases 2020. The Dufton 17-year-old is £108. Mortlach 21 is £570. How much is Cragganmore's 20-year-old? Is it A, £128, B, £188, or C, £248? Now, different online suppliers are going to be £2, £4, maybe north or south of what I'm offering here. But generally, there's a big enough difference there for you to hone in on the right answer. 20-year-old Cragganmore. If the 21-year-old Mortlach is £570, how much is the 20-year-old Cragganmore? If the Dufton 17 is 108, how much is the 20-year-old Cragganmore? The pricing is bizarre to me. Bizarre.
Now,
what do you think, my friend?
I'll say this. Cragganmore was all around Ohio when I first moved here. And I mean, their stuff I think was a bargain from what I remember. Good aged scotches for a cheaper price. So based on the name, I would think it's not 248. I would think it's in the lower tier, either 120 or 188. I just don't know how far down I want to go for that. You know what? If I saw, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna do the cheapest one because it was always pretty cheap when I saw it. So I'm gonna say 128.
By far, the majority of the lounge are absolutely with you. £128, £130 is the recommended retail actually for this, and it turned up today. It was just delivered today. Cragganmore 20.
Wow.
Now I've bought this for a couple of reasons. I'm not recommending this whiskey to anybody. I've not tried it. You can see that this is still sealed. But on paper, this represents pretty good value. And I'm not talking about comparing it to that ridiculously expensive Mortlach at £570. And I'm not talking about comparing it to the Dufton at 17 at 108. I'm talking about comparing it to its peers. 20-year-old whiskey. If we look at Anok 24 that we celebrate so much at £115, this is only £10 or £15 more expensive than that. And I know that it's a couple of years younger than that Anok, but this is cask strength Cragganmore. And another reason is one of the best whiskies I had in the whole of 2019, potentially one of the best whiskies I've ever had, was an aged Cragganmore. It was fabulous. I have not tried this, so I'm not recommending this yet. I'm just suggesting that on paper, in the special releases, when we like to beat them up over prices, let's be honest, this seems like it could be a decent value. Let's see, more to follow. I'm taking them away with me on the weekend, and the Whiskey Rev and I are going to sit down. We're going to try it alongside the new Talisker 8-year-old, and we're going to try it alongside the Cardew 11-year-old that was also released. Let's get this quiz out of the way. We don't need this anymore. Zoom in on Jason, who's chatting in the chat, it looks like.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of questions from some of the viewers here.
And Jimmy Legg has bought me another dram. Jimmy, I didn't think for a second that you didn't like me. I actually still like you. I'll raise this glass of... I didn't even know it was in a glass. It's Laphroaig 16. Jimmy.
So guess what, Roy? I matched my score in the blind tasting. 8 out of 10, maybe.
Oh. This is like the Jason Callori purple patch, right? Every collaboration that we do that's gamified, it's going to be 8 out of 10. Right?
Yeah, and that's it. But that's not. I have to reach for 10 out of 10 at some point.
Neil Cochran is saying we can't get the Anok 24 now. That would be a shame. I'm nervous of a rebrand coming from those guys at Anok as well, and it'll probably mean that it maybe doesn't appear. And even if it does appear, it's not going to be at the same price. It would be a great shame. Hellswood is saying another great evening, slanted to Jason and your good self. Enjoy your break. Looking forward to a week away for your birthday. Listen, stick with the fun tonight. If you want to stay and hang out and do a blind tasting again, please go over and see Jason's video first. But at 3 a.m. UK time, I think it's 10 p.m. Eastern, the Scotch for Dummies are doing an Aqvavitae style blind shootout challenge. This weekend, I'm going to be releasing 2 videos. It's going to be a completely new format, so there'll be an introductory video to give you an idea of what the platform is, what my vision is for it, and give you some examples of the whiskies that's going to be involved. And then the first episode of that series will come out. It passed muster barely, I think, with patrons. They seem to be very happy with it. But of course, I'd be interested to hear what you think of it as well. So feedback to me. There will be a couple of videos dropping over the weekend. I will be back a week from now. I have a guest penciled in. I'm not absolutely sure he's going to make it. There's other things happening with him right now. It means it could be a struggle. But if he's not here next week, it'll be the week after. Certainly, there will be a vPub next week and weekly from there on in, of course. Odd Johan Lundberg, you star, thank you so much for the virtual dram just as we're closing. Thank you so much. I want to say thanks to everybody. There's some other things I wanted to talk about tonight, but it can keep the blind challenge itself. I'm finding a way to mobilize that into a public thing. There will be an event, and I hope I can achieve it this year, that I will be able to send blind challenge packs out to everybody that wants to buy a pack, that we will all be able to get together and do what Jason has done on a huge scale, on a private stream with me. I will host a public blind challenge. I'm ironing out the kinks right now, crossing the T's, dotting the I's, so that everybody can get involved. I've got a fulfillment partner. I've got somebody that can put it together. It's just a case of designing it and dialing it in right now. And hopefully we can realize that. That would be an amazing thing to do, right?
Oh my God. We pulled that off, man, that'd be incredible. I'd be very interested to see how that would turn out for a group of people doing that virtually. Absolutely stellar stuff.
Everybody's sitting at home No pressure on them, not in front of the camera like you are. They can just sit there. They can do the blind, go through the stages, feel exactly what you feel, and then do it live on a stream if they wanted to. It's optional. They could do it after the event. They could do it buddy up with friends. What we're trying to do is make it 5 CL pours as well, so that there is enough. Not like you only had 3 CL, Jason, but 5 CL pours so that you can buddy up with a friend and do it together and have a kind of shared experience.
Absolutely.
Anyway, yeah. Jason, I knew that we were going to go late tonight. I am not even going to apologize for it. 2.5 hours in, it went by very, very quickly, and I get the impression, as I did when I spoke to you earlier in the week, that you and I could shoot the shit for a lot longer than 2.5 hours.
Oh yeah, and yeah, that's it. You get two passionate whiskey drinkers, just like the chat. Forget it. We can go all night. So it was.
Thank you so much, buddy. Wonderful to hang out with you. Wonderful to be able to collaborate with you, and wonderful to see what a tremendous job you did in that blind challenge. Listen, stay in the background, and we'll raise a wee glass once the stream is finished, and I'll say goodbye to these amazing folk. Jason Callori, thank you so much, my friend.
Cheers to you. Cheers to the chat for everyone hanging out tonight. Everybody stay safe. Grab a dram and check out the Mash and Drum if you haven't yet, and enjoy the blind tasting video. Roy, again, it was a pleasure to be on. Cheers, my friend.
Cheers. Slanchava to you, buddy. Thank you. Stay in the background, Jason, and we'll have a wee closeout afterwards. Listen, I'm sure that all of you know who Jason is and what the Mash and Drum channel is all about. If you don't, please seek him out on YouTube. Show him some love. Enjoy that video that he's put out there, and then look back at some of his back catalogue. The passion is obvious. The guy's got a great palate. He's putting out great content. It's one of the best channels out there, and it shows in his growth as well. In the last 2 years, he's gone from just a few hundred subscribers to 27,000 subs. He's doing great stuff, and the cream rises to the top, and I think he is part of that. It's fantastic to see. Great community building around him as well. Talking of great community, thank you all so much for another lovely distraction of a Thursday night. You don't know how much all of you salve my soul. I really look forward to these vPubs. I look to these hangouts with you. I'm sorry that I couldn't hang out with you so much tonight. Steve A, thank you for putting in his channel link. You're a star. Always looking after me, Steve. Congratulations to the 2 winners who won a sniper coin tonight. I'll get these shipped off to you quickly. Congratulations, and perhaps next week, if I don't have a guest on, there'll be a couple of people joining me live to play live as well. Loved hanging out with you again tonight, like I always do. There's some videos dropping, as I say, this weekend, and I'll be back with you a week from tonight for another Thursday night vPub. Thanks for your patience and stamina tonight, all of you. You're all very dearly loved. Slanchava.